Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Jacob Millwood, but everyone calls me Jake. I've been a forest ranger for 19 years now, working the George Washington National Forest here in Virginia. I'm 42 years old, half Cherokee from my grandmother's side, half Irish from my dad's people. Been divorced for 3 years. Got 3 kids I see every other weekend. I grew up in these mountains, in a little holler about 10 miles from where I work now. My daddy worked the coal mines until his lungs gave out when I was 16. I decided right then I wasn't going underground like him. The Forest Service job came up when I turned 23, and I never looked back. People around here respect me. I've led 67 search and rescue operations in my time, found lost hikers, brought them home safe. Back in the winter of '58, I pulled 4 college kids out of a blizzard that would have killed them for sure. Got a medal for that one, though I don't talk about it much. The thing is, I always thought I was too smart to believe in ghost stories. My Cherokee grandmother used to tell me about spirits in the woods, about children who got lost and never found their way home. She called them the holler children. I figured it was just old mountain talk, stories to keep kids from wandering off. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The leaves were just starting to turn, painting the ridges red and gold. I got a call from dispatch around 7 a.m. 3 Boy Scouts had gone missing from their campsite on Devil's Backbone Ridge. That's a nasty piece of ground, about 3,200 feet up, known for sudden weather changes and getting people turned around. The scout leader, a nervous man named Peterson, met me at the trailhead. He was shaking, kept wiping sweat off his forehead, even though it was cool that morning. They were there when I did bed check at midnight, he told me. All 3 boys, sound asleep in their tent. When I woke up at 6, they were gone. Just gone. Did you hear anything in the night? I asked, checking my gear. Any noise that might have woken them? Peterson looked at me funny. That's the weird thing, Ranger Millwood. I kept hearing children laughing. Thought it was my boys playing some game. But when I checked, they were all asleep. The laughing was coming from the woods. Empty woods. I figured the boys had just wandered off early, maybe gone to explore or find a good fishing spot. Kids do dumb things. But as we hiked up to their campsite, something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, not even bugs buzzing around. After 19 years in these woods, you notice when nature goes silent. The campsite was on a little flat spot beside Painter Creek. Everything looked normal at first, tents still staked down, gear laid out neat. But then I started looking closer. All the food was missing, not just the easy stuff, like chips and candy, but everything. Canned beans, soup, even a can of dog food someone had brought for their pet back home. The weird part was how the cans were opened, jagged holes, like something with sharp teeth had bitten right through the metal. Bears don't open cans like this, I muttered, turning a mangled soup can over in my hands. That's when I found the tracks. Small bare feet had walked around the campsite, heading up toward the ridge. At first I thought they belonged to the missing scouts. Then I knelt down and looked closer. 6 toes on each foot. I stared at those tracks for a long time, trying to make sense of them. Maybe it was just the mud playing tricks, making extra marks. But no, the prints were clear as day. 6 perfect toes, small as a child's foot. My radio crackled. "Jake, this is dispatch. We're sending Tommy Valdez up to help you. Should be there in an hour." Tommy was new, only been a ranger for 6 months. 24 years old, eager to prove himself. Good kid, but green as grass. I figured having backup wouldn't hurt, especially with 3 missing boys and tracks that didn't make sense. While I waited for Tommy, I followed the 6-toed prints up the slope. They led to a grove of old oak trees about 100 yards from camp. The temperature dropped fast as I walked. My breath started showing, even though my thermometer read 78 degrees. In the oak grove, I found something that made my skin crawl. Tree branches had been woven together in impossible patterns, 20 feet off the ground. They formed shapes like children's drawings, stick figures holding hands, rough circles, something that might have been a house. But no human could have reached that high, and the branches were fresh, still green. My compass started spinning, just turning in slow circles, never settling on magnetic north. I tapped it, shook it, but it wouldn't stop spinning. When I tried my radio, all I got was static. Then, clear as anything, children's voices came through the speaker. They were singing something in a language I didn't know, high and sweet and wrong. I clicked the radio off fast. Tommy showed up around noon, hiking hard up the trail with sweat soaking his uniform. He was excited, ready to find those missing boys and be a hero. I tried to warn him about the weird stuff, but he just nodded like I was telling him about normal ranger business. Strange tracks, yeah, he said, looking at the six-toed prints. Kids probably got cold feet, made the prints look weird. We followed the trail higher up the ridge. The path got steep and rocky, winding between boulders big as houses. The six-toed tracks kept showing up in muddy spots, but now there were more of them. Different sizes, like a whole group of kids had walked this way. Some of the tracks looked old, really old, like they'd been pressed into rock when it was still mud, years and years ago. But they were sharp and clear, as if they'd been made yesterday. Tommy found the first Boy Scout at 3 p.m. The kid was in a little cave hidden behind a stand of mountain laurel. His name was David Chen, 12 years old according to his scout card. He was sitting with his back against the cave wall, eyes wide open, not moving. At first I thought he was just scared, maybe in shock from spending a cold night in the woods. Then I got closer and saw his face. The boy looked like he'd aged 20 years overnight. His hair had gone white at the roots, his skin was wrinkled like an old man's, and his eyes looked like they'd seen things no kid should ever see. "David," I said, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me, son?" He turned toward my voice, slow as winter honey. When he spoke, his voice was cracked and ancient. "They wanted me to play," he whispered. "They wanted me to stay and play forever." Tommy knelt on the other side of the boy. "Who wanted you to play, David?" "The other children. The ones who got lost. They live in the deep cave now. They've been waiting so long for friends." I felt ice in my stomach. "What children, David? What did they look like?" "Old clothes, really old, and they were cold to touch, so cold." David's eyes fixed on something behind me. "They're here now. Can't you see them?" I spun around. For just a second, I saw a pale face watching from the trees. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a dress that looked like it came from 50 years ago. She had dark, hollow eyes and tangled hair. When I blinked, she was gone. "We need to get him out of here," I told Tommy. "Radio for a medical evac." But our radios were still dead, just static and sometimes those strange children's voices, singing in that unknown language. Tommy tried to lift David, but the boy started screaming. Not regular, scared screaming. This was pure terror, like something was trying to drag him back into that cave. We had to carry him down the mountain, and the whole way he kept looking over his shoulder, mumbling about children who wanted him to play. We got David to the ranger station by evening. The medics said they'd never seen anything like it, a healthy 12-year-old boy showing signs of extreme aging and trauma. They took him to the hospital, but I knew we had 2 more scouts still up there. I wanted to wait until morning, bring in a full search team with better equipment. But Tommy convinced me we should go back up. "Those boys might not survive another night," he said. "We know where the cave is now. We can find them." I should have said no. Should have trusted my gut when every instinct told me to stay away from Devil's Backbone after dark. But I was still thinking like a regular ranger, trying to solve a regular problem. We hiked back up by flashlight, following the same trail. The forest felt different at night, wrong. Our lights seemed weaker, like the darkness was soaking up the beam. Twice I heard children laughing in the distance, but when we stopped to listen, silence pressed in around us. The 6-toed tracks glowed faintly in our flashlight beams, like they were made of something that held light. We followed them past the oak grove, past the first cave, higher up the ridge to places I'd never explored in 19 years of ranger work. The trail ended at a cliff face about 200 feet high. At the bottom was a crack in the rock, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Cold air flowed out of it, carrying a smell like old underground places. The boys went in there. Tommy said, shining his light into the crack. Look, more tracks. He was right. Six-toed prints led into the cave, along with regular boot prints that had to belong to the missing scouts. But mixed in with them were other tracks. Lots of other tracks. Different sizes, different ages, some so faded they looked like they'd been there for decades. Tommy started toward the cave entrance. I grabbed his arm. Wait, we need backup. This isn't normal. What do you mean, not normal? He looked at me like I was crazy. Kids got lost in a cave. We go in, we get them out. That's the job, Jake. I wanted to tell him about the wrongness I felt, about the spinning compass and the children's voices on the radio. But how do you explain something like that to a rookie who thinks every problem has a simple solution? We squeezed through the crack into the cave. Inside, our flashlights showed a tunnel that went back into the mountain. The walls were smooth, worn by water over thousands of years. Our breath came out in white puffs. It was freezing in there. Had to be 40 degrees colder than outside. 20 feet in, we found the handprints. Children's handprints covered the cave walls, hundreds of them. Some looked fresh, pressed into soft clay that had dried recently. Others were older, carved or burned into harder rock. The oldest ones were so faded they were barely visible, but you could still make out tiny fingers and palms. Jesus, Tommy whispered. How many kids have been in here? I was starting to understand, and I didn't like it. Too many. Way too many. We kept going deeper. The tunnel branched off in different directions, creating a maze inside the mountain. We followed the freshest tracks, hoping they would lead to the missing scouts. In a wide chamber about 50 yards into the cave, we found the second boy. His name was Michael Torres, 13 years old. He was sitting in the middle of the chamber, completely still, staring at nothing. Like David, he looked like he'd aged decades in a single night. His scout uniform hung loose on his shrunken frame, but Michael wasn't alone. Children stood around him in a circle. 8 or 10 of them, ages ranging from maybe 6 to 12. They wore clothes from different time periods, bowls, a girl in a 1,930 seconds dress, a boy in overalls that looked even older, another girl in a school outfit from the 1,950 seconds. Their faces were pale and thin, their eyes too large and dark. They were holding hands around Michael, swaying slightly and humming that same strange song I'd heard on the radio. Tommy took a step toward them. Hey, get away from him. The children turned to look at us. Their mouths kept moving, kept humming, but no sound came out now. They tilted their heads like they were curious about us, like they'd never seen adults before. The little girl in the 1,930 seconds dress let go of the circle and walked toward Tommy. She was maybe 8 years old, with long dark hair and a sweet face that would have been pretty if not for those hollow, hungry eyes. Will you play with us? She asked. Her voice sounded far away, like an echo from the bottom of a well. We've been waiting so long for new friends. Tommy smiled and reached out his hand. Sure, sweetheart. We're here to help. Where's the other boy? Where's Kevin? I grabbed Tommy's wrist before he could touch her. Something about the way she moved, the way her eyes never blinked, set off every alarm bell in my head. Don't, I said, but I was too late. The girl's fingers brushed against Tommy's arm, just for a second. Tommy screamed and jerked back, but the damage was done. I watched in horror as his black hair turned white from the roots down. Lines appeared around his eyes, his skin went loose and wrinkled, his back bent forward. In the space of 5 seconds, Tommy aged 30 years. The children giggled and clapped their hands. Michael Torres looked up at us with ancient eyes and said, Now you're like us. Now you understand. I grabbed Tommy's arm and pulled him toward the tunnel entrance. He stumbled along, confused and weak, mumbling about how cold he felt. Behind us, the children started singing again, and this time their voices followed us through the cave like water flowing downhill. We had to get out. We had to get help. But as we ran through the tunnels, I realized we were lost. The passages twisted and turned, leading us deeper instead of back to the entrance. Every tunnel looked the same in our flashlight beams, and everywhere we went, we found more handprints on the walls, more six-toed tracks in the soft cave floor, more children watching us from the shadows just beyond our light. We stumbled through the cave tunnels for what felt like hours. Tommy kept getting weaker, moving slower, his aged body struggling to keep up. Our flashlight batteries were dying, leaving us with dim yellow light that barely pushed back the darkness. Finally, we emerged into a huge underground chamber. Our lights couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. It was like standing inside a cathedral made of rock. And we weren't alone. Dozens of children filled the chamber. They sat on rock ledges, stood in groups, wandered aimlessly through the space. All of them wore clothes from different time periods, going back maybe 100 years. All of them had that same pale, hungry look. All of them were humming that wordless song. In the center of the chamber, we found Kevin Walsh, the third missing scout. He was 13, the oldest of the 3 boys. Unlike the others, he was still conscious and aware. When he saw us, he tried to crawl toward our light. "Help me," he whispered. "Please, I don't want to stay here forever." The little girl in the 1932 dress appeared beside him. Up close, I could see that her dress was dirty and torn, like she'd been wearing it for decades. Her feet were bare and pale as mushrooms. "Kevin wants to leave," she said, pouting. "But he can't. None of them can. Once you come down here, once you play our games, you stay with us always." "What are you?" I asked, though I was starting to guess the answer. "We're the lost ones," said a boy in overalls who looked maybe 10 years old. "We came into the mountain to hide and never found our way out. Now the mountain is our home, and we're never alone." Another child spoke up, a girl in a 1952 school dress. "We died in the mine accident. In 1934. The grown-ups said we were playing where we shouldn't, but we were just trying to find somewhere safe to hide." I remembered the story now. My grandmother had told it to me when I was Kevin's age. A group of children had been exploring an old mine shaft when it collapsed. 7 kids trapped underground, never found. The mine company sealed it up and pretended it never happened. "You've been down here for 90 years?" I asked. The little girl in the 1932 dress nodded. "Time is different here. We don't get older, we don't get hungry, we don't hurt. But we get lonely. So lonely. That's why we bring friends to play with us." "By stealing their life?" Tommy's voice was weak and raspy, like an old man's. "By aging them to death?" "We don't mean to," said the boy in overalls. "We just touch them and the warmth flows into us. It feels so good to be warm again. We can't help it." I looked around the chamber and started to understand the full horror. Some of the children were recent, wearing modern clothes, looking like they'd died in the last few years. Others were older, their clothes and hairstyles from decades past. They'd been collecting lost children for 90 years, feeding off their life force, growing their underground family. "Let the boys go," I said. "Let them leave with us." The children laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "They can't leave. Once you play our games, once you're touched by the cold, you belong to the mountain. Just like you do now." I looked at Tommy. His hair was completely white, his face mapped with wrinkles. He was leaning against the cave wall, breathing hard. The children's touch had taken years off his life, and he was still aging. "There has to be a way," I said. "Some way to break this." The little girl tilted her head. "You could stay. If you stayed willingly, if you played with us forever, we might let the others go. We like you, Jake. You remind us of the ranger who used to come looking for lost children. He joined us too, eventually." She pointed to a corner of the chamber where a man in an old Forest Service uniform sat staring at nothing. He looked like he'd been there for 20 or 30 years. I felt panic rising in my chest. These things could keep me here forever, steal my life bit by bit until I was just another hollow-eyed child singing their endless song. But if I didn't do something, Tommy would die, and Kevin would become one of them. Then I remembered my grandmother's stories. She'd told me about spirits who couldn't cross over, couldn't find peace. She'd also told me how to help them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch I always carried. Inside was sage and sweetgrass, blessed by the Cherokee elders on the reservation. My grandmother had given it to me when I became a ranger, told me it would protect me in the woods. I'd never believed it before. Now, it was my only hope. "You're not children anymore," I said, striking a match and lighting the sage. "You're spirits. Lost spirits who need to find your way home." The children hissed and stepped back as smoke filled the chamber. Their faces changed, becoming less human, more hungry and desperate. "We don't want to go home," the little girl said. Home is cold and dark and empty. Here we have friends. Here we have games to play. Home is rest, I said, remembering the words my grandmother had taught me. Home is peace. Home is where the pain stops. I started singing an old Cherokee song, one she'd hummed while braiding my hair when I was small. I didn't remember all the words, but I remembered the melody, the rhythm, the feeling behind it. The children stopped moving, their hollow eyes filled with something that might have been tears. We're scared, whispered the boy in overalls. We've been scared for so long. I know, I said, still singing. But you don't have to be scared anymore. You can go home now. You can rest. One by one, the children began to fade. Not disappearing, but becoming lighter, more transparent. The little girl was the last to go. Will you remember us? She asked. Always. I promised. She smiled, and for just a moment, she looked like a real 8-year-old girl instead of a hungry spirit. Then she was gone, and the chamber was empty except for me, Tommy, and Kevin. The cave started shaking as soon as the children disappeared. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and I could hear the mountain groaning around us. Whatever force had kept this place stable for 90 years was gone now. I grabbed Kevin under one arm and helped Tommy with the other. We ran through the collapsing tunnels, following the fresher air toward the entrance. Twice the ceiling came down behind us, sealing off passages. We made it out just as the whole cave system collapsed. The rescue team found us at dawn, sitting by the blocked cave entrance. Tommy looked like he'd aged 40 years overnight. Kevin was weak but alive, though he'd never talk about what happened in the cave. Not really. The Forest Service blamed everything on a toxic gas pocket, said it caused hallucinations and accelerated aging in some rare cases. They sealed the cave entrance with concrete and closed that whole section of the mountain to camping. Tommy never got better. The doctors couldn't explain what happened to him, couldn't reverse the aging. He's in a care home now, his mind stuck somewhere between 24 and 64. Sometimes he knows me, sometimes he doesn't, but he always remembers the cold. Kevin recovered, mostly. He never joined the Boy Scouts again, never went camping. But he grew up normal, got married, had kids of his own. Sometimes he sends me Christmas cards. He never mentions the mountain. David Chen wasn't so lucky. His aging stopped, but his mind never came back all in the way. He spent his teenage years in and out of psychiatric hospitals, telling doctors about children who wanted him to play forever. His parents moved away when he turned 18. I haven't heard from them since. As for me, I changed. The mountain marked me that night. My hair went gray within a month, though I was only 42. I get nightmares about children singing in the dark. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods, I hear them calling my name. But I also understand things I never did before. I believe my grandmother's stories now. I respect the Cherokee warnings about burial sites and sacred places. I stopped drinking, started participating in the tribal ceremonies again. Other rangers come to me now when they find things they can't explain. Strange tracks, missing hikers, places where the forest goes wrong. I teach them what my grandmother taught me. That some places hold old pain, old hunger. That not everything lost wants to be found. The Holler children are gone now, at rest finally after 90 years of wandering. But the mountain remembers them. Other hikers still report hearing children's laughter echoing through empty woods, though no one else has disappeared. I keep sage in my pocket when I patrol Devil's Backbone, just in case. And I always leave tobacco offerings at the sealed cave entrance, thanking the spirits for letting me live, for letting me help them find peace. Some people say I've gone native, lost my mind to mountain superstitions. Maybe they're right. But I know what I saw down there in the dark. I know what saved us. And I know there are other lost things in these mountains, other spirits who haven't found their way home yet. That's why I keep working, keep walking these trails. Not just to find the living, but to help the dead find rest. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hunting you. Sometimes it's what's been waiting in the dark for 90 years, just hoping someone will remember to play. My name is Rebecca Thornfield, but everyone calls me Becca. I'm a park ranger on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, and I need to tell you about something that happened in 1977. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. I was 31 then, and I'd been working for the National Park Service for 8 years. My daddy was a ranger before me, and his daddy before him. The Thornfields have been watching over these mountains for 3 generations. We know every trail, every ridge, every place where bears like to fish and where wildcats make their dens. People always said I was good at my job, real good. I could track a black bear through thick brush and tell you what it had for breakfast. I knew the difference between coyote prints and dog prints in the dark. When tourists saw strange things in the woods, they called me. When farmers lost livestock, they called me too. The thing is, I never believed in monster stories. Bears get big around here, sometimes 600 pounds or more. When people saw something huge and dark moving through the trees, it was always a bear. When they heard scary sounds at night, it was just wildcats or owls. Everything had an explanation if you knew what to look for. My husband, Tom, used to tease me about it. "Becca," he'd say, "you explain away everything. What if there really is something out there that you can't put in your little reports?" I lost Tom that spring in a logging accident. A tree fell wrong and crushed his truck. After the funeral, work was all I had left. I threw myself into it, trying to prove I belonged in a job where most folks thought women didn't have any business being. It was late October when everything started. The leaves were turning red and gold, and the tourists were coming through to see the colors. That's when I got the call from Bill Sutton, the state game warden. "Becca, I need your help," Bill said. His voice sounded tight, worried. "We got a problem up near Bent Mountain. Something killed a hiker." "Bear attack?" I asked, already reaching for my gear. "Maybe, but it's strange. Real strange. You need to see this." Bill was waiting for me at mile marker 267, along with Dr. Patricia Reeves from the State University. Patricia studied animal behavior, and she had the same no-nonsense attitude I did. We'd worked together before on problem bears. "What do we have?" I asked. Bill led us down a trail into thick woods. Hiker named Dave Mason, 23 years old, from Charlotte. His girlfriend reported him missing yesterday when he didn't come back from his morning walk. We found Dave about a quarter mile from the parkway. What was left of him? I've seen bear attacks before. I've seen what wildcats can do to deer and what dogs can do to sheep. But this was different. This was wrong in ways that made my stomach turn. Dave had been partially eaten. Big chunks were missing from his arms and legs, but the bite marks, they looked like they came from something with huge teeth, bigger than any bear I'd ever seen. And there were scratches on nearby trees, claw marks that went up 9 feet high. "Look at this," Patricia said. She was kneeling by the body, examining the wounds with a magnifying glass. "These bite patterns don't match any native predator. The spacing is all wrong." Bill showed me the tracks. They were the strangest prints I'd ever seen, about 6 inches across, with what looked like claw marks. But some of them almost looked like they had thumbs. "Could be a really big dog," Bill said, but he didn't sound convinced. I knelt down and studied the prints closer. The stride length was huge, maybe 8 feet between steps. Whatever made these tracks was running on 2 legs, not 4. "Have you noticed anything else strange?" I asked. Bill nodded. "All the wildlife cleared out. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Even the flies won't come near the body." He was right. The forest was dead quiet. In 20 years of walking these woods, I'd never heard such complete silence. It felt like the whole mountain was holding its breath. We spent the rest of the day taking pictures and measurements. Patricia collected samples of the bite marks and claw scratches. I followed the trail of footprints as far as I could, but they disappeared on a rocky ridge about half a mile away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those tracks, about the way the forest had gone silent. Tom's voice echoed in my head. What if there really is something out there that you can't put in your little reports? The next morning, I drove to the Cherokee Reservation to talk to Mary Littlecrow. Mary was in her 70s, and she knew more about these mountains than anyone alive. Her people had been here for thousands of years before mine showed up. "Mary," I said, "have you ever heard stories about something that kills people up near Bent Mountain?" Her face went very still. "What did you see, child?" I told her about Dave Mason, about the strange tracks and the silent forest. Mary listened without saying a word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "My grandmother told me stories," she said, "about the Kekle Kudli, The devil bear. It comes every 20 or 30 years, takes people, changes people. Changes them how? Mary's eyes were dark and serious. It gets inside them, makes them into something else, something hungry. I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to tell Mary that her grandmother's stories were just old superstitions, but I kept thinking about those tracks, about the way they looked almost human. How do you stop it? I asked. Mary shook her head. You don't stop it, you wait for it to leave, or you get very lucky and kill it before it kills you. I left the reservation with more questions than answers, but I had a job to do. Bill wanted me to help track down whatever killed Dave Mason. Patricia was convinced it was some kind of new predator, maybe a hybrid or an escaped exotic animal. I didn't know what to believe anymore. All I knew was that something was hunting in my mountains, and it was my job to find it, even if I wasn't sure I wanted to. 3 days after we found Dave Mason, Patricia called me at 6 in the morning. Becca, we found more tracks, fresh ones. You need to get up here now. I threw on my clothes and drove to the meeting spot. Bill and Patricia were already there, along with 2 of Bill's deputies and a bloodhound named Rex. Rex picked up a scent trail about an hour ago, Bill said. Strong one. Whatever we're tracking passed through here last night. The tracks were clearer this time. 6-inch paws with long claw marks, but the shape was all wrong. The heel was too long, and those marks that looked like thumbs were definitely there. No dog makes prints like this, I said. Patricia was taking pictures with her camera. I've been researching all night. There's no known animal in North America that matches these tracks. We followed the trail for 2 miles through thick forest. Rex stayed on the scent, but he was acting strange. His tail was tucked between his legs, and he kept whining. Good hunting dogs don't act scared like that. The trail led us to a small clearing where we found something that made my blood run cold. In the center of the clearing was a pile of deer bones, but they weren't scattered around like you'd see after a normal predator kill. They were arranged, stacked up in a neat pile with the skull on top. Animals don't do that, Bill said quietly. No, I agreed. They don't. Patricia was examining the bones with her magnifying glass. These have been gnawed on. Look at these tooth marks. They're huge. But see how clean the breaks are? Whatever did this has incredible jaw strength. Around the bone pile, the ground was torn. Deep gouges in the earth, like something had been digging with huge claws. And on the trees around the clearing, more claw marks. All of them 9 feet high or more. It's marking territory, I said. Like a bear would do, but no bear gets 9 feet tall. Bill finished. That's when we heard it. A sound from deeper in the forest that made Rex howl and try to run back to the truck. It started low, like a wolf howling. Then it got higher, almost like a person screaming. Then it dropped down into something that sounded like a bear's roar. The sound went on for 30 seconds, echoing off the ridges around us. When it stopped, the forest was dead quiet again. What the hell was that? One of the deputies whispered. I'd heard wolves howl and bears roar and wildcats scream. This was all of those sounds mixed together, but louder and meaner than anything I'd ever heard. We need to go, I said. Now. We packed up our gear and headed back to the trucks. But as we walked, I had the feeling we were being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I kept looking over my shoulder. Just before we reached the parking area, I saw something moving in the trees. Something big and dark, walking upright between the trunks. It was too far away to see clearly, but it looked like it was following us. Bill, I said quietly, don't turn around, but I think we've got company. Bill's hand moved to his pistol. Where? 3 o'clock, about 50 yards out. Bill glanced over casually. I see it. Jesus, that thing is huge. The shape moved behind a thick pine tree and disappeared. We waited for 5 minutes, but it didn't come back out. Maybe it was just a bear standing up, Patricia said, but she didn't sound convinced. Bears don't follow people like that, I said. We drove back to town in silence. That night, I called Mary Littlecrow again. It's getting bolder, I told her, following us, making sounds I've never heard before. The Kekle Kudla is hungry, Mary said. It's been sleeping for many years. Now it's awake and looking for food. You said it changes people. What did you mean? Mary was quiet for a long time. My grandmother said it can get inside a person, take them over, make them part of it. They look human during the day, but at night. That's impossible, is it? You've seen the tracks, you've heard the sounds. Is it more impossible than a 9-foot animal that doesn't exist? I couldn't argue with that. The next morning, Bill called with bad news. We found Rex. Found him where? About a mile from yesterday's tracking site. He's dead, Becca, torn apart. I met Bill at the location. Poor Rex was scattered across 20 yards of forest floor. Something with huge claws and teeth had ripped him to pieces. But what bothered me most was that Rex had been running toward the creature when he died, not away from it. Why would a hunting dog run toward something that was going to kill him? I asked. Bill shook his head. Dogs don't usually. Unless what? Unless it smelled like something familiar. Something safe. That afternoon, we got another call. A local farmer named Joe Briggs said something had killed 3 of his sheep the night before. Tore right through the fence, Joe told us. Didn't eat much of them, just killed them and left them, like it was doing it for fun. The sheep were in the same condition as Dave Mason and Rex, partially eaten, with those same huge bite marks. But this time, there were human footprints leading to the sheep pen. Regular boot prints, size 11 or 12. Someone walked up to the pen, I said, studying the tracks. Then the animal tracks start here. Patricia knelt down beside me. It's like the person turned into the animal. The human tracks came from the direction of town. We followed them back along the dirt road for half a mile before. They disappeared on the pavement. Whatever this thing is, Bill said, it's smart. It knows how to hide its trail. That night, I sat in my cabin with my rifle across my lap, listening to every sound outside. Around midnight, I heard something walking around my house. Slow, heavy footsteps that circled the building 3 times. I looked out the window but couldn't see anything in the darkness. The footsteps stopped right outside my front door. Something scratched at the door. Long, slow scratches that sounded like claws on wood. Then I heard a sound that made my heart nearly stop. It was Tom's voice. Becca, the voice said. Let me in, honey, I'm cold. My husband had been dead for 6 months. I grabbed my rifle and called out, Who's there? The voice came again, perfect in every way. Tom's accent, his way of saying my name. It's me, Becca, please open the door. I knew it wasn't Tom. I knew Tom was buried in Pine Ridge Cemetery. But the voice was so real, so perfect, that part of me wanted to believe. Go away, I said. The scratching started again, harder this time. Deep gouges in my front door. Then the voice changed. It got deeper, meaner. Let me in, Becca. I know you're in there. The scratching stopped. I waited by the window with my rifle ready, but whatever it was had gone away. In the morning, I found the claw marks on my door. 4 parallel gouges, each one 3 inches deep. No animal I knew could scratch wood like that. And in the dirt by my front step, I found a single boot print, size 11, the same size we'd found at Joe Briggs's farm. Bill Sutton lived in a cabin about 5 miles from mine, deeper in the woods where he could keep an eye on the wildlife. He was a good man, tough and smart, and he'd been hunting these mountains for 30 years. On the morning of October 29th, Bill didn't show up for our meeting. That wasn't like him. Bill was always on time, always reliable. Patricia and me, I drove to his cabin around noon. His truck was in the driveway, but something was wrong. The front door was hanging off its hinges, torn completely away from the frame. Bill, I called out. No answer. We found him in his kitchen. What was left of him? Bill had been ripped apart just like Dave Mason and the animals. But this time, there was something different. Something that made me understand what Mary Littlecrow had been trying to tell me. Leading up to Bill's back door were human footprints. Regular boot prints in the mud. But leading away from the house were those huge animal tracks. The human prints led to the cabin. The animal prints led away. It's impossible, Patricia whispered. But I was starting to understand. What if it's not? I called Mary Littlecrow from Bill's phone. The creature killed my partner, I told her. But there were human tracks leading to the house and animal tracks leading away. The Kekle Kudla has found a new host, Mary said. Her voice was sad but not surprised. Your friend is gone, child. The thing that wears his shape is not him anymore. How does it work? It gets inside a person, takes them over slowly. During the day, they seem normal. But at night, the beast comes out. Each time it feeds, it gets stronger. The person gets weaker. I looked at Patricia, who was studying the tracks with her magnifying glass. She'd been acting strange lately, hungrier than usual. She'd ordered her steak nearly raw at dinner last night. "How long does it take?" I asked Mary. "For the change to complete? Maybe a week. Maybe less if the creature is very hungry." I hung up the phone and turned to Patricia. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About how you've been feeling lately." Patricia stood up slowly. In the afternoon light, I could see that her fingernails were longer than they'd been a few days ago, and sharper. "I feel fine," she said, but her voice sounded different, deeper. "Patricia, when did you first start feeling strange?" "I don't know what you mean." But she did know. I could see it in her eyes. There was something else looking out at me, something hungry. "The night we found Dave Mason," I said. "You touched the body. You took samples of the bite marks." Patricia's face changed. For just a second, her features seemed to shift, becoming more animal-like. Her teeth looked longer. "You need to leave," she said. "Now." "Patricia, we can help you. Mary knows rituals. Get out." When she shouted, her voice was partly human and partly something else. Something that had no business coming out of a person's throat. I backed toward the door, keeping my hand on my pistol. Patricia followed me, and I could see her changing. Her back was getting broader. Her arms were getting longer. "It's too late," she said. And now her voice was completely different. "I'm so hungry, Becca. So very hungry." I ran. I made it to my truck and drove back to town as fast as I could. But I knew Patricia, or the thing that had been Patricia, would follow me. It had Bill's knowledge now, and it was getting Patricia's too. It knew where I lived, where I worked, how I thought. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in a motel in town, on the second floor, with multiple exits. Around midnight, I heard something howling in the distance. The same terrible sound we'd heard in the forest, but closer now. I called Mary Littlecrow. "It's taken my friend," I told her. "It's using her body." "Then you have very little time," Mary said. "Once the change is complete, the creature will be unstoppable. It will have human intelligence and animal strength." "How do I fight it?" "Silver bullets," Mary said, "blessed with the old prayers. You must shoot it through the heart during the new moon." "When's the new moon?" "Tomorrow night." I had 1 day to save Patricia and stop the creature. 1 day to find silver bullets and get them blessed by Cherokee prayers I didn't understand. But first, I had to survive the night. Around 3 a.m, I heard scratching at the motel room door. Slow, deliberate scratches that I recognized from my own front door. "Becca," came Patricia's voice. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I looked out the window. Patricia was standing in the parking lot, but something was wrong with her shape. She was taller than she should be, and her arms hung down almost to her knees. "Let me help you," she called out. "I know you're scared, but it doesn't have to be this way." "Go away, Patricia." "I'm not Patricia anymore," the voice said, and it was getting deeper. "But I have her memories. I know how much you miss Tom. I could bring him back for you." That made me angry. "You can't bring back the dead." "Can't I?" "I brought back Bill. He's here with me." I looked out the window again. There were 2 shapes in the parking lot now. The tall, wrong-looking thing that had been Patricia, and a shorter figure that moved like Bill Sutton. "Bill?" I called out. "Hello, Becca," came Bill's voice. "Everything's fine now. Come down and see." But when the moonlight hit his face, I could see that his eyes were completely black, and his teeth were too long for his mouth. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window with my rifle, watching them circle the motel. They didn't try to break in, but they didn't leave either. They just waited. At sunrise, they were gone. I had 1 day to get ready for the fight of my life. Mary Littlecrow was waiting for me at her house with a small leather pouch and 3 silver bullets. "My grandfather made these," she said, holding up the bullets. "Real silver, melted down from jewelry that belonged to our family. They've been blessed with the old prayers. Will they work? If you're strong enough to use them. And if you can find the creature's heart." Mary taught me the words I'd need to say. Cherokee phrases that were older than any church, prayers that her people had used to fight evil spirits for thousands of years. "The creature will be strongest tonight," Mary warned me. "The new moon gives it power, but it also makes it vulnerable. If you can wound it with silver during the new moon, it will weaken. Then you can kill it." What about Patricia? Mary's face was sad. The girl you knew is gone. The creature ate her soul first. All that's left is her body and her memories. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Patricia had been a good friend, a smart woman who loved her work. The thing wearing her face wasn't her anymore. I spent the afternoon preparing. I loaded my rifle with the silver bullets and practiced the Cherokee words until I could say them without stumbling. I also sharpened my hunting knife and filled my pockets with the sacred herbs Mary had given me. As the sun went down, I drove back to Bent Mountain. If I was going to face this thing, it would be on my territory, where I knew every tree and trail. I parked at the same spot where we'd found Dave Mason and hiked into the forest. The woods were completely silent, like every living thing had fled. Even the insects had gone quiet. I didn't have to wait long. Around 8 o'clock, I heard something crashing through the trees. Big, heavy footsteps that shook the ground. Then I saw it. The thing that had been Patricia was 9 feet tall now, covered in dark fur, but still walking upright like a person. Its arms were as thick as tree trunks, ending in hands with claws like kitchen knives. But the worst part was its face. It still looked partly like Patricia. I could see her nose, her eyes, even some of her hair. But her mouth had stretched into something full of teeth that belonged on a shark. "Hello, Becca," it said in Patricia's voice. "I've been looking for you. Where's Bill?" "Bill is here." The creature gestured behind it, and Bill Sutton stepped out from behind a tree. But it wasn't really Bill anymore. His skin was gray, his eyes were black, and when he smiled, I could see that his teeth were pointed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," the Bill thing said. "Join us. Let the hunger in. It feels so good to be strong." I raised my rifle. "I don't think so." The Patricia creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You can't kill us with regular bullets. We already died. These aren't regular bullets." I shot the Bill thing first. The silver bullet hit him square in the chest, and he screamed like a wounded animal. Black smoke poured out of the wound, and he collapsed. The Patricia creature roared and charged at me. I rolled to the side and fired again, but the bullet only grazed its shoulder. The creature spun around and swung one huge arm at me, catching me in the ribs and sending me flying into a tree. I hit hard and felt something crack. Pain shot through my chest, but I still had my rifle. The creature was advancing slowly now, savoring the moment. "You hurt my friend," it said. "Now I'm going to take my time with you." I struggled to my feet and started saying the Cherokee words Mary had taught me. The creature stopped walking and tilted its head, listening. "Old words," it said. "Powerful words, but not powerful enough." It lunged at me again. This time I was ready. I dove to the left and came up firing. The silver bullet hit the creature center mass, right where its heart should be. The Patricia creature screamed and fell to its knees. Black smoke began pouring out of the wound, and I could see Patricia's real face flickering through the monster features. "Becca," Patricia's voice whispered, "help me." I walked closer, keeping my rifle ready. The creature was shrinking, becoming more human-looking. But I remembered what Mary had said about it being able to trick people. "Patricia, is that really you?" "It's me, the real me." I fought it off. "Please, help me up." She reached out with one hand, and for a moment it looked completely human. But I noticed her fingernails were still too long. "I'm sorry, Patricia," I said, and shot her through the heart. The creature let out one final scream that echoed across the entire mountain. Then it collapsed and didn't move again. In the morning light, the body looked like Patricia again. Just Patricia, lying peacefully in the forest like she was sleeping. The Bill thing had turned back into a pile of old bones and rotted clothing. I said the final Cherokee prayer Mary had taught me, to make sure the creature's spirit couldn't find a new host. Then I called the sheriff and told him I'd found Patricia's body. I never told anyone the whole truth about what happened on Bent Mountain. The official report said that Patricia and Bill had been killed by a rabid bear, which I'd had to shoot. The area was closed to hikers for 6 months, while they made sure there were no more dangerous animals around. But I knew better. And sometimes, on dark nights when the moon is new, I still hear something howling in the distance, something hungry and patient, waiting for another chance to feed. That was 47 years ago, and I'm an old woman now. I retired from the Park Service in 1995, but I still live in these mountains, still keep watch. Every few years, someone reports strange tracks or mysterious animal kills. When that happens, I drive up to the Cherokee Reservation and talk to Mary's granddaughter. We check the old places, look for signs that the Kekle has returned. So far, the mountains have stayed quiet. I learned something important that October in 1977. There are things in this world that science can't explain, things that don't fit in neat little reports. But that doesn't make them less real. I also learned that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Mary Little Crow's grandmother knew more about fighting evil than all my training and equipment combined. These days, I teach wilderness safety classes for new park rangers. I tell them about bears and wildcats and the importance of proper food storage. But I also tell them to listen to the local people, especially the Cherokee elders. Their stories aren't just superstition, they're warnings. Most of the young rangers smile and nod politely when I talk about respecting traditional knowledge. They think I'm just a crazy old lady with too many tall tales. But some of them listen, really listen. Those are the ones I take aside and tell the whole truth to. About silver bullets and Cherokee prayers and creatures that can wear human faces, just in case. Because the Kekle is still out there somewhere, sleeping in the deep places of the mountains. It may sleep for decades, but it will wake up again eventually. When it does, someone will need to be ready. Someone will need to know how to fight it. I keep 3 silver bullets in my gun safe, blessed with the old prayers. My granddaughter knows where they are and what they're for. When I'm gone, she'll take over the watch. The mountains are beautiful and peaceful most of the time. Tourists come to see the fall colors and take pictures of the wildlife. They never know how close they come to something that would love to add them to its collection of bones. That's probably for the best. But if you ever find yourself hiking alone in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and you notice that the forest has gone completely quiet, and you see tracks that don't belong to any animal you know, well, just remember what I've told you, and maybe say a little prayer to whatever gods you believe in. Because some things are still hunting in these old mountains, and they're always hungry. My name is Michael Hartwell, but everyone just calls me Mike. I'm a park ranger at Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, and I need to tell you about something that happened in 1984. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world. Before I became a ranger, I was Dr. Michael Hartwell. Had a PhD in geology, taught at the university, published papers that other professors actually read. I thought I was pretty smart back then. Thought I had all the answers about rocks and mountains and how the earth worked. That changed when I started talking about living stone. See, I'd been studying some weird rock formations up in the Appalachians. The way certain granite behaved didn't match what I learned in textbooks. Tiny movements that shouldn't happen, chemical changes that made no sense. When I wrote about it, when I suggested maybe stone could be more alive than we thought, my colleagues laughed me right out of the university. So I came to Grandfather Mountain, been here 12 years now, and I love this job. Every morning I wake up to that famous rocky face staring down at me. The Cherokee called it the Old Grandfather, and after all this time, I understand why. There's something ancient about this place, something that watches. My job is simple enough. Check the trails, help lost hikers, make sure tourists don't do anything stupid. I know every rock and tree on this mountain. Know which stones are loose, which paths flood when it rains, where the bears like to wander. This mountain and I, we understand each other. Or so I thought. It started with the hikers. 3 different families in 1 week, all reporting the same crazy thing. They said the rocks were humming. Not just wind through the trees or water over stones. Actual humming, like someone singing under their breath. "Ranger Mike," said Mrs. Patterson, a school teacher from Charlotte with her 2 kids. The rocks up near the face, they were making music. The kids, I heard it first, but then I did too. Like a lullaby my grandmother used to sing. I figured it was just wind acoustics. These mountains are full of caves and gaps that can make strange sounds. But when the 3rd family mentioned it, I decided to check it out myself. Linda Ashby, our park interpreter, came with me. She's part Cherokee, knows all the old stories about these mountains. Smart woman, grew up hearing her grandmother's tales about when the earth was young and everything had a spirit. My people always said this mountain was alive, Linda told me as we hiked up the main trail. Maybe those hikers are hearing what we've always known was there. I laughed it off. I was still thinking like a scientist back then. We reached the area where people reported the humming. Beautiful spot, right below the main rock face. Granite walls rising up like a giant staircase, worn smooth by millions of years of weather. I set up my equipment. Seismic detector, sound recorder, all the fancy gear I still had from my university days. At first, everything seemed normal. Birds singing, wind in the trees, a creek babbling somewhere below us. I was about to pack up when Linda grabbed my arm. "Listen," she whispered. And then I heard it, low and soft, like someone humming a song in another room. It seemed to come from the rocks themselves, a deep thrumming that made my chest vibrate. The sound recorder was going crazy, needles jumping all over the place. "Wind resonance," I said, but my voice shook a little. "Has to be wind resonance." The humming stopped. Linda was staring at the rock face with wide eyes. "Mike," she said slowly, "look at your seismic detector." I looked down. The machine was recording steady, rhythmic vibrations. Like a heartbeat, like something huge and ancient was breathing under our feet. That's when I noticed the tourists had gone quiet. A family with young kids had been playing nearby, but now they stood frozen, looking up at the rocks with the same expression you'd have if you suddenly realized you weren't alone in a dark room. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, walked closer to the granite wall. Her parents called for her to come back, but she kept going like she was sleepwalking. She pressed her small hand against the stone. The humming started again, louder this time, more complex, almost like the rock was singing back to her. "Sarah," her mother yelled, "get away from there." But Sarah just smiled and leaned her forehead against the granite. "It's happy," she said in that clear voice kids have. "The mountain is happy we're here." That's when I saw something that made my scientific brain just shut down completely. The rock under the little girl's hand moved. Not crumbling or breaking, it flowed, like thick honey, reshaping itself around her fingers. For just a second, the granite formed what looked like a larger hand, gently holding hers. Then everything went back to normal. The stone was solid again. The humming stopped. The little girl skipped back to her parents like nothing had happened. But I'd seen it. Linda had seen it. And deep down, I knew my nice, logical world had just cracked wide open. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I told myself it was a trick of the light, stress, maybe something I ate, but I kept going back to that spot with my equipment, trying to find a rational explanation. The recordings didn't lie. Whatever was making that sound, it wasn't wind or water or anything in my geology textbooks. The vibrations were too steady, too organized. They had patterns, like language. Linda started having dreams. "It's talking to me," she said one morning when I found her sitting by the ranger station, looking like she hadn't slept. In Cherokee, old Cherokee, the kind my great-grandmother spoke, it's saying it's been lonely. "Who's talking to you?" "The mountain, Mike. Grandfather Mountain is talking to me." I wanted to tell her she was being silly, but something in her voice stopped me. Linda wasn't the type to make things up. She was practical, level-headed. If she said the mountain was talking, maybe I should listen. That afternoon, a family of 4 went missing on the main trail. The Hendersons from Virginia, experienced hikers who knew these mountains well. Their car was still in the parking lot, but no one had seen them since morning. Linda and I joined the search team. We split up to cover more ground, and I took the path toward the Singing Rocks. Seemed like a logical place to check, since that's where all the weird stuff had been happening. I found their backpacks first, neatly arranged in a circle around a flat piece of granite, like someone had set them down for a picnic. But no sign of the family. Then I heard Mrs. Henderson calling for help. Her voice came from above me, somewhere up the rock face. Impossible, because there's no trail there. Just steep granite walls that would take ropes and serious climbing gear to scale. I looked up and saw her. Mary Henderson, standing on a ledge about 50 feet up, waving at me. Next to her were her husband and 2 teenage boys, all looking perfectly calm. "How did you get up there?" I shouted. "The rocks helped us," she called back. They made stairs. I looked at the granite wall between me and them. Smooth as glass, no handholds, no way to climb it. But as I watched, the stone began to change. Not breaking or crumbling. Flowing, reshaping itself into a rough staircase, like someone was carving steps from the inside. My radio crackled. "Mike, you find anything?" It was Linda's voice. "I found them," I said, never taking my eyes off those impossible stairs. "Linda, you need to get over here. Now." The stone steps solidified, looking like they'd been there for 1,000 years. Mr. Henderson started climbing down, and his family followed. They moved easily, like the rocks were helping them find handholds. When they reached the ground, I asked them what happened. "We got lost," Mr. Henderson said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Took a wrong turn somewhere. But then the mountain showed us the way, made a path right up the rock face so we could see where we were." "The mountain made a path?" "Oh yes," said their youngest son, maybe 14. "It was amazing. The rocks just moved out of the way, like they wanted to help. And there was this humming sound, really pretty, like a song." I looked back at the granite wall. The stairs were gone, smooth stone again, like nothing had ever been there. That's when Linda arrived, breathing hard from running. She took one look at the Henderson family and nodded, like this all made perfect sense. "It's starting," she said quietly. "What's starting?" "The mountain is waking up. My grandmother always said this would happen someday. When the earth got tired of being ignored, it would remember how to talk." The Hendersons went back to their car, chattering excitedly about their adventure. To them, it was just a cool story to tell friends. They had no idea they'd just proved that everything I thought I knew about physics was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those stone stairs, the way the granite had moved like it was alive, like it was thinking. Around midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and drove back to the mountain. I needed to see that place again, needed to understand what was happening. The parking area was empty, moonlight casting long shadows across the rocks. I grabbed my flashlight and headed up the trail, trying to be quiet. Didn't want to wake up whatever was sleeping in these stones. I reached the spot where I'd found the Hendersons. Everything looked normal in the moonlight, just ordinary granite, ordinary trees. But as I stood there, I started hearing it again. The humming. Soft at first, then growing stronger. Not just one voice now, but many. Like a choir hidden inside the mountain, singing a song older than human memory. And then the rocks began to glow. Just a faint light at first, deep inside the stone, like seeing candles through thick curtains. The granite walls around me pulsed with soft, blue-white light, keeping time with the humming. I should have been terrified, should have run back to my truck and gotten the hell out of there. But the music was so beautiful, so peaceful. It felt like being welcomed home after a long journey. That's when I saw the faces, carved into the rock walls, barely visible in the strange light. Dozens of them, hundreds, human faces of every age and type, all looking at me with stone eyes that somehow seemed alive. The humming grew louder, and I realized the faces were singing, their stone lips moving just slightly. Breath that wasn't breath, making music that shouldn't exist. One face, an old Cherokee man with kind eyes, seemed to focus on me. His mouth moved, and I heard words inside the music. Not in English, but somehow I understood. Asterisk, we have been waiting. Asterisk, the voice said. Asterisk, the mountain has been waiting. It is time for the old agreements to be remembered. Asterisk. The light faded, the humming stopped. The faces melted back into ordinary rock. I stood there in the dark, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand, and knew my life had just changed forever. Word got around fast about the Hendersons' rescue. Local news picked it up, called it a heartwarming story about hikers finding their way with help from friendly park rangers. They had no idea how close to the truth they actually were. But the attention brought more visitors, and more visitors meant more people experiencing things they couldn't explain. The reports started flooding in, hikers finding new trails that hadn't been there the day before, rock climbers discovering handholds that appeared exactly where they needed them, kids playing games with stones that seemed to play back. Linda spent her days fielding phone calls from people who swore the mountain had helped them somehow, saved them from getting lost, warned them about dangerous weather, even fixed a broken ankle by having the person rest against a special stone. "This is getting out of hand," said my supervisor, Chief Ranger Patterson. "People are starting to think this place is some kind of miracle site. We need to control the situation before someone gets hurt." But it was too late for control. The mountain had decided to wake up, and nothing we did was going to stop it. The first real incident happened on a Tuesday morning in July. A geology class from the state university came to study the rock formations. 15 students and their professor, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, who I knew from my old academic days. Liz was a good geologist, practical and thorough. When she called me that afternoon, her voice was shaking. "Mike, we need to talk, right now." I met her in the parking lot. Her students were loading equipment into their van, all talking at once, excited and confused. Dr. Hayes looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What happened up there?" I asked. "The rocks moved, Mike. Not erosion, not settling. They actively rearranged themselves while we watched. My students were taking core samples, standard procedure. But every time they tried to drill into the granite, the stone would flow away from the drill bit." Flow away? Like it was avoiding being hurt. And then, she paused, looking around to make sure no one else could hear. Then it started showing us things. What kind of things? Fossils that shouldn't exist, mineral formations that violate basic chemistry. One section of wall opened up like a book and showed us rock layers from different geological eras, all mixed together in impossible ways. It was like the mountain was trying to teach us something. One of her students, a young woman with bright red hair, came over to us. "Professor Hayes, should I file the mineral samples under unknown or just make up a classification?" "What do you mean?" I asked. The student held up a small chunk of rock. "This came from the granite wall, but it's not granite. It's not any stone we can identify. Crystal structure keeps changing depending on how you look at it. And sometimes," she glanced around nervously, "sometimes it glows." As if responding to her words, the rock sample pulsed with faint blue light. Dr. Hayes took the sample and shoved it into her pocket. "We're leaving," she told her students. "Pack everything up, now." After the university group left, Linda and I hiked back up to the site. The area looked normal, but there was something different in the air. A feeling of anticipation, like the mountain was waiting for something. "It's trying to communicate," Linda said. "My grandmother told stories about the old days, when people and the earth could talk to each other, before we forgot how to listen." "Listen to what?" "To the wisdom in the stones, the memories in the mountains. This place has seen everything, Mike. Dinosaurs, ice ages, the first humans to walk these trails. It remembers." The sun was setting, painting the granite walls orange and red. As darkness fell, the humming started again. But this time it was different. Urgent, almost like a warning. That's when we heard the screaming. A group of teenage campers had set up their tents in a valley below us. We could see their campfire, hear their voices carried on the evening wind. But now someone was yelling for help. We grabbed our flashlights and ran down the trail. By the time we reached their camp, the kids were huddled together by their fire, pointing at the rocks around them. "They're moving," one of the boys shouted. "The rocks are moving." I looked where he was pointing and felt my blood turn cold. The boulder field around their campsite was shifting. Slowly, deliberately. Large stones were rolling downhill, but not because of gravity. They moved in formation, like they had a purpose. "Everyone, stay calm," I called out. "Move away from the rocks, toward the fire." But even as I said it, I realized the boulders weren't trying to hurt anyone. They were forming a circle around the camp, protecting it. Linda grabbed my arm. "Mike, look up." I tilted my head back and saw them. Lights in the sky, but not stars. These were moving, descending toward us. 3 bright objects that looked like aircraft, but made no sound. "UFOs," whispered one of the girls. The lights hovered above us for maybe 30 seconds. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, they shot away into the distance. When I looked back down, the rocks had stopped moving. They formed a perfect protective circle around the terrified campers, like ancient standing stones. The mountain had been protecting them. From what, I didn't want to know. We helped the kids pack up and escorted them to their cars. They left talking about the coolest camping trip ever, completely missing how close they'd come to something that could have gone very wrong. "It's escalating," Linda said as we watched their taillights disappear down the mountain road. "The mountain is getting more active, more protective." "Protective of what?" "Of itself, and of the people who respect it." She looked at me seriously. "But Mike, what happens when someone comes here who doesn't respect it? Someone who wants to hurt it?" I was about to find out. The next morning, a convoy of trucks arrived at the base of the mountain, heavy equipment, drilling rigs, and a crew of workers in hard hats. The lead truck had a sign on the door. Piedmont Mining Company. They'd come to tear the heart out of Grandfather Mountain. And somehow, I knew the mountain was going to fight back. The mining crew set up their base camp, in the valley below the main rock face. 30 men, with heavy equipment, planning to blast a new quarry right through what the Cherokee called the mountain's heart. Their supervisor was a thick-set man named Dave Collins, who chewed tobacco and treated the whole mountain like it was just a pile of building materials waiting to be harvested. Park Service has no jurisdiction here, he told me when I tried to explain about the protected areas. We got permits, bought the mineral rights, fair and square. This operation is completely legal. Maybe legal, but the mountain didn't care about paperwork. The first sign of trouble came when their drill rigs started malfunctioning. Bits would break for no reason, engines would overheat, and electronic equipment kept going haywire. Collins blamed it on cheap parts and old machinery. Then the accidents started. Nothing fatal at first. Workers would trip over rocks that hadn't been there 5 minutes before. Tools would disappear and turn up in impossible places. One man swore his hard hat was pulled right off his head by invisible hands. Linda tried to warn them. She went down to their camp and talked to Collins about the Cherokee beliefs, about respecting the sacred places. He laughed her off. "Lady, I've been blasting mountains for 20 years. If the rocks could fight back, don't you think I'd know by now?" That night, 3 of his workers quit. They'd been setting charges for the morning blast when the rock face started humming. Not just humming, singing, complex harmonies that seemed to come from inside the mountain itself. Spooked the hell out of them, Collins told me the next day. Bunch of superstitious idiots, good riddance. But I could see he was worried. Losing workers meant delays, and delays meant money. The mountain was just getting started. On Friday morning, Collins decided to do a test blast. Just a small charge to see how the granite would break. Linda and I watched, from the ridge above, both of us sick with worry about what would happen. The explosion echoed across the valley like thunder. Chunks of rock flew everywhere, and dust filled the air. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then the mountain screamed. Not a human scream, something deeper, older. The sound of the earth itself in pain. Every person within 5 miles heard it, felt it in their bones. Car alarms went off in the town below. Dogs howled, birds burst from the trees in panicked clouds. The sound went on for almost a minute, rising and falling like a wind through a canyon. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost worse. Linda was crying. "They heard it," she whispered. "They actually heard it." Down in the valley, Collins's crew stood frozen around their equipment. Even from a distance, I could see they were all shaken. But Collins wasn't backing down. If anything, the scream seemed to make him more determined. "Just gas escaping from underground caverns," he shouted to his men. "Nothing but natural acoustics. Get back to work." That's when the mountain decided to show them what real power looked like. The ground started shaking. Not an earthquake. I'd felt earthquakes before. This was different. Deliberate. The tremors came in waves, each one stronger than the last. Cracks appeared in the granite walls around the mining camp, not random stress fractures, but organized patterns. Like someone was writing in the stone itself. Linda gasped. "Mike, those cracks, they're Cherokee symbols." She was right. The cracks formed letters, words, whole sentences in the old Cherokee script. And even though I couldn't read them, somehow I understood what they said. Asterisk. Leave this place. You are not welcome here. This is sacred ground. Vidal asterisk. The mining crew saw it too. 30 tough men staring up at words written in living rock, and every one of them looked terrified. Collins tried to rally them. Just geological settling, happens, all the time after blasting, nothing supernatural about it. But then the rocks started moving. The entire quarry wall began to flow like thick liquid, tons of granite reshaping itself, filling in the blast crater, erasing every trace of the morning's damage. In minutes, the rock face looked exactly like it had before, except for the Cherokee words, which stayed carved deep into the stone. Half the crew threw down their tools and walked off the job right then. The other half stood there in shock, watching tons of solid rock move like water. Collins was screaming now, red-faced and furious. "It's impossible! Rock doesn't do that. Rock doesn't heal itself. That's when the mountain showed him just how wrong he was. The ground under the mining equipment began to soften. Drill rigs and bulldozers started sinking into granite that had turned to quicksand. Workers ran for their lives as thousands of dollars worth of machinery disappeared into the earth. But the mountain wasn't done. The granite walls around the camp started to close in, moving slowly but unstoppably, like the valley was trying to swallow the entire operation. "Everyone out!" Collins finally yelled. "Evacuate, now!" The remaining workers ran for their trucks, leaving everything behind. Collins stood his ground until the last second, shaking his fist at the moving mountains. "This isn't over," he screamed at the rocks. "I'll be back with bigger charges. You can't stop progress." The granite wall behind him pulsed with that strange blue light, and for just a moment, I saw something that made my heart stop. A face in the stone. Huge, ancient, with eyes like deep caves. The face of the mountain itself, looking down at the tiny human who dared to threaten it. The face opened its mouth and spoke. Not in Cherokee this time, but in a voice like grinding stone, in English that Collins could understand. Asterisk, leave now, little man. Do not return. Next time, I will not be so gentle. Asterisk, Collins stumbled backward, fell, got up, and ran for his truck without looking back. Within an hour, the mining camp was deserted. The valley began to repair itself, granite flowing back into its natural patterns. By evening, you'd never know the mining crew had been there at all, except for the Cherokee words, still carved into the rock. A permanent reminder that some places are too sacred to be bought and sold. The story hit the national news within days. Mysterious geological activity stops mining operation. Scientists came from universities across the country, trying to find rational explanations for what had happened. They found nothing. The rock samples they collected showed normal granite composition. The Cherokee writing on the cliff face looked ancient, like it had been carved centuries ago, and no one could explain how tons of mining equipment had simply vanished into solid stone. Linda and I became the unofficial spokespeople for the mountain. We gave interviews, led tours, tried to help people understand what they were dealing with. But the real negotiation happened between Linda and the mountain itself. She spent hours sitting by the rock face, speaking in Cherokee to something that spoke back in harmonics only she could hear. Slowly, she helped me understand what we were dealing with. Grandfather Mountain wasn't just alive, it was ancient beyond human comprehension. A consciousness that had existed since the earth was young, watching over this land and its people for millions of years. The Cherokee had always known. Their ancestors had made agreements with the mountain spirit, promises to protect and respect the sacred places. But over time, those agreements had been forgotten by the outside world. The mining threat had awakened the mountain's defensive instincts. It had reached out to Linda because she still carried the old knowledge in her blood. And it had included me because someone with scientific training needed to witness what was happening. Together, we worked out a new arrangement. The Cherokee Nation stepped forward to purchase the mineral rights from Piedmont Mining. The company was happy to sell after what had happened to their equipment. The land became protected under federal law as a sacred site. In return, the mountain agreed to be more subtle about its manifestations. No more dramatic rock movements or voices in the stone. Just the gentle humming that hikers had always reported, and the occasional helping hand for lost travelers. Collins never came back. Word was he'd taken a job in Nevada, far from any mountains that might be paying attention. Dr. Hayes published a paper about anomalous geological activity, but kept it vague enough that her career survived. Her rock sample, the one that sometimes glowed, disappeared from her lab one night. I suspect it found its way home. As for me, I'm still here, still a park ranger, still watching over this mountain. But now I understand my real job. I'm a translator, a bridge between the old world and the new. When hikers come to me with stories about singing stones or helpful rocks, I listen. When children press their hands against granite walls and smile at something only they can hear, I make sure their parents don't worry too much. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the tourists have gone home, I sit by the rock face and listen to the mountain's stories. Tales of ice ages and forest fires, of the first people to walk these trails, of times when the earth and its children knew how to talk to each other. The Cherokee were right. This mountain is alive, ancient and patient and wise beyond human understanding. And it's been waiting a very long time for us to remember how to listen. The humming still happens, usually at sunset or dawn. Visitors still report it, and I still tell them it's just wind through the rocks. Most of them believe me. They want the simple explanation for something that feels magical. But some don them no better. Some of them sit quietly and listen to what the mountain is really saying. Asterisk, welcome, you are safe here. This place remembers when all the world was green and young. Rest and know you are home. Asterisk, late at night, when I'm alone on patrol, I sometimes see the faces in the rock again, generations of Cherokee ancestors, keeping watch over their sacred mountain. They nod to me as I pass, acknowledging our shared responsibility. The mountain chose me that first day, when I heard its heartbeat through my instruments. It needed someone from the outside world to witness its awakening, someone who could speak both languages, science and spirit. I'm 52 now, getting close to retirement age, but I know I'll never really leave this place. When my time comes, I think the mountain will make room for one more face in its granite memory. And maybe someday, when another mining company or developer threatens this sacred ground, they'll hear my voice in the stone, warning them away. The mountain is patient, the mountain remembers, and the mountain protects what it loves. That's a truth worth singing about. My name is Samuel Brennan, but everyone calls me Sam. I've been a forest ranger for 6 years now, working mostly in the mountains of West Virginia. Before that, I was a medic in Vietnam, saw enough blood and death over there to last 3 lifetimes. When I came home, I needed peace. The mountains gave me that. At least, they used to. I'm telling you this story because people need to know what really happened at Spruce Knob in October of 1971. The official report says it was some kind of rare plant disease. That's a lie. But I understand why they had to lie. The truth would scare folks too much. Spruce Knob is the highest peak in West Virginia, sitting at 4,863 feet. It's beautiful country up there, thick forests of red spruce and hemlock, rocky outcrops with views that go on forever. I've been working that area for 2 years, and I thought I knew every trail, every stream, every cave. I was wrong. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Ellen Crawford, a botanist from the university, had gone missing. She'd been studying rare plants up near the peak for 3 weeks. Research permit was good for another month, but she'd missed 2 scheduled check-ins with her department. Probably just got caught up in her work. Chief Ranger Williams told me as he handed over the search files. You know how these scientist types are. But her family's worried, so we need to find her. I partnered up with Deputy Frank Morgan from the local sheriff's office. Frank was born and raised in these mountains. His family had been here for 5 generations. If anyone knew the backcountry around Spruce Knob, it was Frank. We met at the trailhead early Wednesday morning. Frank was a big man, maybe 50 years old, with hands like tree roots and eyes the color of old pine bark. He had that mountain way of talking, slow and careful, like every word cost him money. Sam, he said, shaking my hand. Heard good things about you. Glad to have someone reliable on this. What do you think happened to her? I asked as we checked our gear. Frank was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the mountain. Could be anything. Bears, maybe. Gets cold up there fast this time of year. Folks have been known to get turned around, end up walking in circles till they drop. Something in his voice made me look at him closer. But you don't think that's what happened? Nope. He shouldered his pack. Found her campsite yesterday. You'll see what I mean. We hiked for 2 hours before we reached Dr. Crawford's camp. It was set up in a small clearing about halfway up the mountain, near a stream. Her tent was still there, properly staked and dry. Her equipment was laid out neat and organized. Sample containers, notebooks, a microscope in a waterproof case. But something was wrong with the clearing itself. All around the campsite, the trees and plants looked sick. Leaves had turned brown and curled up, like they'd been hit by frost. But it was only October, and the weather had been mild. More strange, the dead plants formed a perfect circle around the camp, maybe 30 feet across. Outside that circle, everything was green and healthy. What do you make of this? I asked Frank, kneeling down to examine a dead fern. Don't know. But his voice was tight. Never seen anything like it. I picked up one of Dr. Crawford's notebooks and flipped through it. Her handwriting was small and neat. The last entry was dated 5 days ago. Asterisk. Unusual root growth patterns observed. Some specimens appear to be growing at accelerated rates, inches per day rather than normal seasonal growth. We'll collect samples tomorrow for detailed analysis. Local flora showing signs of nutrient depletion despite healthy soil composition. Asterisk. Frank, look at this. He read over my shoulder, frowning. What's she mean by accelerated rates? I was about to answer when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Around the edge of the dead circle, I could see tracks in the soft dirt. They started out looking like normal boot prints, Dr. Crawford's size, from the look of them. But as the tracks moved away from the camp, they changed. The boot prints got longer, wider, and instead of the clear tread pattern of hiking boots, they started to look like roots. Thick, twisted roots pressed into the earth. Frank, my voice came out as a whisper. You need to see this. He crouched down beside me, studying the tracks. I watched his face go pale. Jesus Christ, he breathed. You've seen something like this before. It wasn't a question. I could tell by the way he looked at those tracks, like he was seeing a ghost. Frank stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. My granddad used to tell stories about people who went into these mountains and changed, called them root walkers. Stories? Folks going missing. Sometimes we'd find their clothes wrapped around tree trunks, like the trees had grown right through them. But I always figured those were just tales to keep kids from wandering off alone. I looked at the tracks again. They led deeper into the forest, following the stream bed up toward the peak. In the distance, I could hear something that sounded like wind through leaves. But there was no wind. We need to follow these tracks, I said. Frank nodded, but I could see he didn't want to. Yeah, I know. As we packed up Dr. Crawford's equipment to take back to the ranger station, I found one more thing that bothered me. Her sleeping bag was laid out neat and tidy, like she'd never slept in it. But when I picked it up, I found something underneath. A small pile of dirt, rich, black soil that was still damp, and growing from that soil, a tiny green shoot. A plant I'd never seen before, with leaves that looked almost like tiny hands. I left that plant where it was. Something told me not to touch it. Something told me it was watching. Thus, we followed the tracks for the rest of that day. They led us deeper into the old-growth forest, places where the trees were so thick that even at noon, it felt like twilight. The track pattern stayed the same, starting human, becoming more root-like as we went. Frank knew these woods better than any man alive, but even he seemed confused by the path we were following. This don't make sense, he said, as we stopped for water. She's heading toward Devil's Backbone Ridge. Ain't nothing up there but cliffs and dead ends. Maybe she was lost. Maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. The thing that bothered me most was how quiet it was. No bird sounds, no squirrels chattering. Even the insects seemed to have gone silent. Just our footsteps and our breathing, and that strange sound like wind that seemed to follow us. Around 3 in the afternoon, we found the first real sign of Dr. Crawford. It was her jacket, hanging from a tree branch about 8 feet off the ground. But when we got closer, we could see it wasn't just hanging there. The branch had grown through it. Not like someone had hung the jacket on the branch, like the branch had pushed right through the fabric and kept growing. That's impossible, I said, reaching up to touch the branch. The bark was smooth and young, but the tree itself was old growth. Centuries old. Is it? Frank asked quietly. I looked at him. You've seen this before, too. Not exactly. But my granddad. He trailed off, staring at the jacket. He disappeared when I was 12. We found his hat wrapped around an oak tree, same as this. Folks said he must have hung it there before he died, and the tree grew around it over the years. How many years? That's the thing. We found it the next day. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. We kept following the tracks. They were getting stranger now, less like boot prints, and more like something else had been walking on them. The spaces between the prints were getting longer too, like whatever was making them was taking bigger and bigger steps. As the sun started to set, we came to a stream crossing. The water was running dark, almost black, and it smelled wrong. sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in a grave. The tracks led right into the water and disappeared. "We'll have to cross," I said, but Frank grabbed my arm. "Wait." He was staring at something on the other side of the stream. "You see that?" I followed his gaze and felt my heart skip. On the far bank, barely visible in the growing shadows, something was standing between the trees. It looked like a person at first, tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. But, as my eyes adjusted, I could see it wasn't quite right. The figure was too tall, too still. And its skin, if it was skin, had a rough, bark-like texture. "Dr. Crawford?" I called out. The thing turned toward us. It had a face, but it was wrong. The features were human, but stretched, distorted. And when it opened its mouth to answer, the sound that came out was like wind through dead leaves. "Sam," my name, drawn out like a breath. But I'd never told Dr. Crawford my name. Frank's hand was on his pistol. "That ain't her." The thing took a step toward the stream, and I could see that its feet weren't feet at all. They were roots, thick and twisted, that seemed to sink into the ground with each step. "Sam, come, help." "Don't listen to it," Frank whispered. "Don't move." But I was already stepping toward the water. Something about that voice was pulling me, making me want to help. It sounded so sad, so lost. Frank grabbed my shoulder hard. "Snap out of it." The shock of his grip broke whatever spell the thing had on me. I stumbled backward, my head clearing. "What the hell was that?" I gasped. "Root walker," Frank said grimly. "Has to be." The figure on the other side of the stream let out a sound that might have been laughter or might have been sobbing. Then it turned and walked back into the trees, its root feet making soft squelching sounds in the mud. We made camp a quarter-mile back from the stream, but neither of us slept much. All night long, we could hear things moving in the darkness, footsteps that sounded like roots dragging through dirt, voices that called our names in the wind. "Frank," I whispered around midnight, "how many people have gone missing up here?" "Over the years? More than you'd think. Usually folks just assume they got lost, fell off a cliff, got eaten by bears. But my family's kept count. Going back to when the first settlers came through these mountains, we've lost maybe 24 people, all in the same area." "Around Spruce Knob?" "Yep, and they all got found the same way. Clothes wrapped around trees, like the trees grew right through them. Sometimes bones scattered around, but never a whole skeleton." I stared up at the dark canopy above us. "What do you think they are? The root walkers?" Frank was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he said, "I think they used to be people, folks who came up here and got changed, turned into something else. By what? Don't know. But I got a feeling we're going to find out." In the morning, we found new tracks around our campsite. Dozens of them, all the same root-like pattern. They circled our camp 3 times, but never came closer than 20 feet. It was like they were waiting for something. We crossed the stream at first light, moving careful and quiet. The water was even darker than it had been the night before, and when I knelt down to fill my canteen, Frank stopped me. "Wouldn't drink that if I were you." He was right. Looking closer, I could see things floating in the water. Bits of plants and what looked like hair. Human hair. The tracks picked up again on the other side, leading toward a steep slope covered in old-growth hemlock. The trees here were massive, some of them 5 feet across at the base. They'd been growing for hundreds of years, maybe longer, but something was wrong with them. As we climbed, I started noticing things. Faces in the bark. Human faces, stretched and distorted but still recognizable as faces. They looked like they were screaming, or maybe crying. "Frank, are you seeing this?" He nodded, his face grim. "Been seeing it for the last 10 minutes. The higher we climbed, the more faces we saw. Some looked fresh, recently formed in the bark. Others were old, weathered, barely visible. But they were all there, watching us as we passed. And then I saw one I recognized. It was in a huge hemlock near the top of the ridge. The face was clearer than the others, less distorted. A woman's face, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Ellen Crawford. "Jesus," I breathed. "It's her." Frank came up beside me, studying the face and the bark. "But she's still alive. Look at her eyes." He was right. The eyes were moving, following us as we stood there. And as I watched, the mouth opened slightly, trying to speak. Help. The voice was barely a whisper, coming from the tree itself. Help me. I reached out to touch the bark, but Frank grabbed my wrist. Don't. Look at her hands. I looked down at the base of the tree. Dr. Crawford's hands were there too, pressed against the trunk like she was trying to push herself out. But they weren't quite human hands anymore. The fingers were too long, too thin, and they ended in root-like tendrils that disappeared into the earth. How long has she been like this? I asked. Can't tell, Frank said, but if we don't do something soon, she'll be gone completely. What do you mean? Watch. As we stood there, I could see the bark slowly growing over more of Dr. Crawford's face. Her features were becoming less distinct, more tree-like. In a few more hours, she'd be just another face in the wood. We have to get her out, I said. How? She's part of the tree now. I pulled out my hatchet. We cut her out. Sam, no. Frank grabbed my arm as I raised the hatchet. You hurt that tree. You hurt her. Look. He pointed to Dr. Crawford's face. As I'd lifted the hatchet, her eyes had gone wide with terror. She was shaking her head as much as the bark would let her. Then what do we do? Before Frank could answer, we heard something crashing through the underbrush below us. Something big, moving fast. 3 figures burst out of the trees. They might have been human once, but not anymore. Their bodies were tall and twisted, covered in bark and moss. Their arms had become branch-like, ending in twig fingers. Their legs were thick root systems that seemed to flow over the ground rather than walk on it. But the worst part was their faces. They still looked human, but wrong. Stretched out, with hollow eyes and mouths full of thorns instead of teeth. Run, Frank said quietly. What about Dr. Crawford? Run. The root walkers came at us fast, moving through the trees like they were part of the forest itself. Frank and I ran down the slope, crashing through underbrush, jumping over fallen logs. Behind us, I could hear them coming. They made sounds like wind through branches, but I could make out words. Stay. Join us. Become part of the forest. I'd been a soldier. I'd been in firefights and rocket attacks. But I'd never been as scared as I was running down that mountainside with those things chasing us. Frank knew a shortcut. A deer trail that led to an old logging road. We made it to his truck, just as the sun was setting. The root walkers followed us to the edge of the trees but stopped there, like they couldn't leave the deep woods. We sat in the truck for 10 minutes, breathing hard, watching the tree line. What the hell are those things? I asked. People, Frank said. People who got caught by whatever's up there. What's up there? I don't know, but my granddad used to say there was something old in these mountains. Something that was here before the trees, before the Indians, before anything. He called it the Root Mother. The Root Mother said it was sleeping under the mountain, dreaming tree dreams. But sometimes it would wake up hungry, and when it did, it would call people to it, change them, make them part of itself. I thought about Dr. Crawford's face in the bark, her eyes pleading for help. We have to go back for her. Frank started the truck. I know, but not tonight. Tonight we plan, and we get help. What kind of help? The kind that kills trees. As we drove away, I looked back at the mountain. In the growing darkness, I could see lights moving between the trees. Not electric lights, something green and sickly, like the glow you sometimes see on rotting logs. The root walkers were watching us leave, and I had the feeling they'd be waiting for us when we came back. We came back the next morning with chainsaws, hatchets, and 5 gallons of industrial herbicide from the forestry station. Frank had also brought something else, an old coffee can full of what looked like black powder. What's that? I asked. Something my granddad left me. He called it tree killer. Said it was the only thing that could hurt the root mother. I opened the can and sniffed. It smelled like sulfur and burnt wood, and something else I couldn't identify. Something that made my nose burn and my eyes water. How do you know it works? I don't, but it's all we got. We hiked back up to where we'd found Dr. Crawford, moving careful and quiet. The forest was even more wrong than it had been the day before. More faces in the bark. More twisted shapes that might have been human once. And the trees themselves were moving, not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. Actually moving, like they were alive. Branches reaching out toward us, roots writhing under the ground. Doctor. Crawford was still there, but she was fading fast. The bark had grown over most of her face now. Only her eyes were still visible, and they were becoming more tree-like with each passing hour. "We're going to get you out," I told her, kneeling down by the tree. "Just hang on." Her mouth moved behind the bark. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could read her lips. "Run." That's when the root mother spoke to us. The voice came from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the ground, from the air itself. It was like the whole forest was talking. "Why do you fight me, little humans? I offer you immortality. I offer you peace. Join with me willingly, and your transformation will be gentle." "Where are you?" I shouted, looking around at the trees. "I am everywhere. I am the root that drinks from the stream. I am the branch that reaches for the Sunday. I am the seed that falls to the ground and becomes the forest." Frank stepped forward, the coffee can in his hands. "We want the woman back." The forest laughed. It was the sound of wind through 1,000 leaves, but cruel and cold. "She is already mine. As you will be. As all humans will be, in time. Your species is young and weak, mine is old and patient. I have been dreaming under this mountain for 10,000 years, and in my dreams, I have seen the future. A world where flesh becomes bark, where blood becomes sap, where every human joins the eternal forest." "Why?" I asked. "Why do you want us?" "Because you think. You dream. You create. These are gifts my kind does not possess alone, but when you join with me, I gain your consciousness while you gain my immortality. Together, we become something greater than either could be alone." I looked at Dr. Crawford's face in the bark. Was there still consciousness there? Was she still herself, trapped inside the tree? "The woman," I said. "Is she still her? She is more than she was. She understands now. She has seen the beauty of my vision. Ask her yourself." The bark around Dr. Crawford's mouth shifted, and she spoke. But her voice was different now, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. "It's beautiful, Sam. You can't imagine how beautiful. To be part of everything, to feel the sunshine on 1,000 leaves, to drink from every stream with 1,000,000 roots. Join us, please." But her eyes were saying something different. Her eyes were screaming. That's when I understood. The root mother didn't just take people's bodies, it took their minds, their consciousness, and made them part of its own thought. Dr. Crawford was still in there, but she was trapped, forced to speak the root mother's words. "No," I said, backing away from the tree. "We're leaving, and we're taking her with us." The forest went silent for a moment. Then every tree around us started moving at once. Branches whipped down toward our heads. Roots burst up from the ground, trying to wrap around our legs. The root walkers came out of the woods from every direction, their thorn-filled mouths open in silent screams. Frank threw the contents of the coffee can in a wide circle around Dr. Crawford's tree. Where the black powder hit the ground, the earth hissed and steamed. The roots writhing up from the soil suddenly stopped, curling back like they'd been burned. "It works!" he shouted. I started up the chainsaw and went after Dr. Crawford's tree. The root mother shrieked as the blade bit into the bark, a sound like a hurricane tearing through the forest. But I kept cutting, trying to free her from the trunk. The root walkers charged us, but they couldn't cross the circle Frank had made with his grandfather's powder. They pressed up against it like it was a wall they couldn't see, clawing at the air. "Hurry!" Frank yelled, pouring out more powder to widen the circle. I don't know how long this will hold them. I cut deeper into the tree, following the outline of Dr. Crawford's body. She was screaming now, but I couldn't tell if it was pain or relief. Black sap poured from the cuts, thick as blood. That's when I saw them, roots, thin as hair, running from Dr. Crawford's body deeper into the tree and down into the ground. They pulsed with a green light, like they were carrying information back and forth. The connection to the root mother. I cut through them one by one. With each severed root, Dr. Crawford's screams got more human, less like the sound of wind through leaves. "Sam." Frank's voice was panicked. "The powder's running out." The root walkers were pressing closer to our circle. Some of them were starting to push through, their bark-covered bodies smoking where they touched the barrier. I made the final cut. Dr. Crawford fell out of the tree and onto the ground, covered in sap and bark fragments, but human again. She was unconscious but breathing. "Got her," I shouted. Let's go. Frank threw the last of the powder in a line toward the logging road, creating a path through the root walkers. We ran for our lives, me carrying Dr. Crawford, Frank clearing the way with his hatchet. Behind us, the root mother's voice followed, promising revenge, promising that we couldn't escape, that the forest would find us wherever we went. But we made it to the truck. We made it down the mountain. And Dr. Crawford lived. Dr. Crawford spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctor said it was exhaustion and exposure, complicated by some kind of allergic reaction that had caused bark-like growths on her skin. They removed what they could and said the rest would fade with time. They were half right. The bark did fade, but it didn't disappear completely. If you knew where to look, you could still see the pattern in her skin. Faint lines that looked like tree rings. And sometimes, when she was tired or stressed, small leaves would grow from her fingernails. She remembered everything, being caught by the root walkers. The slow transformation as the root mother's consciousness invaded her mind. The feeling of becoming part of something vast and alien and hungry. It's still up there, she told me when I visited her in the hospital. The root mother, it's angry now. It knows we can fight it. What do you think it'll do? Wait, plan. It has time. It's been here for thousands of years. It can wait a few more. Frank retired from the sheriff's department on medical disability. The official reason was back problems from years of hiking rough terrain. The real reason was the changes. He'd been exposed to the root mother's influence for too long. His feet had started to change, becoming more root-like. His skin was getting rough and bark-colored. And sometimes, late at night, he said he could hear the forest calling to him. I fight it, he told me. Every day I fight it, but it's getting stronger. The Forest Service closed off a 10-square-mile area around Spruce Knob. Officially, it was to study the plant disease outbreak that had killed so much vegetation. Unofficially, it was to keep people away from something they couldn't understand or control. I got transferred to a different district, but I kept in touch with the situation. Every few months, I'd get reports of strange things happening near the closure area. Hikers seeing lights in the forest, trees found arranged in patterns that didn't occur naturally. And occasionally, people going missing. We'd saved Dr. Crawford. We'd hurt the root mother badly enough to make it retreat. But we hadn't killed it. I don't think it can be killed. I still work for the Forest Service. I've become something of a specialist in unusual incidents. Plant diseases that move too fast to be natural. Animal behavior that doesn't make sense. People who walk into the woods and come back. It's different. It's not just Spruce Knob. There are other places, other forests, where old things sleep and dream. And sometimes, they wake up hungry. Frank was right about one thing. The root mother has time. It can wait, it can plan, and sooner or later, it'll try again. Maybe not this year, maybe not this decade, but it's still up there, under the mountain, growing stronger. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is blowing through the trees just right, I can hear it calling my name, calling me home. My name is William McReynolds, but everyone calls me Bill. I've been a forest ranger here in Pike County, Kentucky for 10 years now, and before that, I spent 5 years working the coal mines, just like my daddy and his daddy before him. The mountains here are in my blood, every hollow and ridge as familiar as the lines on my weathered hands. I never thought I'd be the one telling this story. Hell, if someone had told me this tale just 6 months ago, I'd have laughed them right out of the ranger station. But I've seen things now that changed everything I thought I knew about these old mountains. It all started because of what happened to my family back in '52. The mine collapse at Devil's Fork took my brother Tommy, my uncle Jake, and my cousin Pete all in one terrible morning. 23 men went down that day, and only 7 came back up. The company said it was a gas pocket they couldn't have known about, but we all knew better. They'd been cutting corners on safety for months, ignoring the warning signs. After the funerals, I swore I'd never set foot in another mine shaft as long as I lived. That's when I took the job with the Daniel Boone National Forest. Figured working above ground, helping keep these mountains safe and clean, was better than dying in a hole for a company that didn't give a damn about us. The folks around here trust me because I'm one of them. I know their stories, their struggles. When old Mrs. Henderson calls about poachers on her land, or when the Jameson boys need help finding their lost hunting dog, they call me because I understand this place. I speak their language. That's probably why State Inspector Harold Dutton asked for me specifically when the reports started coming in about Black Rock Mine. Black Rock had been sealed up tight since 1934, after the worst mining disaster in Pike County history. 47 men died when the main shaft collapsed, and the company just walked away, leaving the families with nothing but grief and a mountain of debt. The state finally sealed it up in '58, welding steel plates over every entrance and posting warnings about dangerous gases. But in the fall of '62, things started getting strange around Black Rock Mountain. Mrs. Ellie Combs was the first to call it in. She lived in a little cabin about a half-mile from the old mine entrance, and she swore she could hear scratching sounds coming from inside the mountain at night. Like something trying to claw its way out, she told me, her voice shaking over the phone. Then there was the smell. A sulfur stench that hung around the mine site, even though there hadn't been any active mining for nearly 30 years. The trees around the entrance started dying too, their leaves turning black and falling off even though it was only October. I drove up there twice in 2 weeks, checking the seals, looking for signs of vandalism or illegal entry. Everything looked solid. Those steel plates were thick as a man's thumb and welded tight. Nobody was getting through them without some serious equipment. But Harold Dutton had a different take when he called me on a cold Monday morning. "Bill," he said, "I need you to meet me at Black Rock this afternoon. I've been looking at the reports you filed, and there's something you need to see." Harold was a good man, maybe 50 years old, with thinning gray hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been inspecting mines across eastern Kentucky for 15 years, and he knew more about underground safety than anyone I'd ever met. If Harold was worried about something, it was worth paying attention to. We met at the ranger station just after lunch, and I followed his truck up the winding mountain road to Black Rock. The closer we got, the worse that sulfur smell became. By the time we parked near the main entrance, it was so strong it made my eyes water. "Sweet Jesus," Harold muttered, covering his nose with his handkerchief. "That's not natural." The first thing I noticed was that the warning signs had been knocked down, not cut down or removed properly. Knocked down, like something big had barreled right through them. The metal posts were bent and twisted. Then Harold pointed to the sealed entrance. "Look at those plates, Bill." I stepped closer and felt my stomach drop. The steel plates were still there, but they were bulging outward. Not inward, like they would if someone was trying to break in from outside. Outward, like something inside had been pushing against them with tremendous force. "That's impossible," I said. "Those plates are welded solid, and there's nothing alive down there anyway. The gas would kill anything in minutes." Harold pulled out his atmospheric testing equipment, the same gear he used to check air quality in active mines. He took readings near the entrance, then stepped back, shaking his head. "Methane levels are off the charts," he said. "Carbon monoxide too. The air down there would drop a man in 30 seconds, maybe less." But as we stood there studying those bulging steel plates, we both heard it. Tap, 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 a rhythmic sound coming from deep inside the mountain, steady and deliberate, like someone hammering on metal. Harold and I looked at each other, and I could see my own confusion reflected in his eyes. "Could be settling," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. "Could be," Harold agreed, but his voice told me he didn't believe it either. That's when I noticed the footprints in the soft dirt around the entrance. They looked human at first glance, but something was wrong with them. They were too long, and there were deep gouges where the toes should be, like whoever made them had claws instead of toenails. The tapping stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving us standing in the sulfur-stinking silence of a dying mountain. 3 days later, Harold called me before dawn. "Bill, you need to. Get up to Black Rock right now," he said. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Someone's broken into the mine." I threw on my clothes and drove up the mountain as fast as my old truck would take me. Harold was already there when I arrived, standing next to his government sedan with his equipment scattered around him. The steel plates that had been bulging outward just days before were now split wide open, peeled back like the top of a sardine can. "This happened sometime during the night," Harold said, pointing to the gaping entrance. "But look at this, Bill. Look how the metal's bent." I crouched down to examine the twisted steel. The plates hadn't been cut or blown apart. They'd been pushed outward from the inside with such force that the thick metal had simply torn apart. The edges were smooth, almost polished, like something had worn them down over time. What kind of equipment could do this from inside a sealed mine? I asked. That's just it, Harold said. There is no equipment down there. Hell, there's nothing down there but poison gas and cave-ins. The smell was worse now. Not just sulfur, but something else underneath it. Something rotten and organic, like meat that had been left out too long. Harold was taking more atmospheric readings. Gas levels are actually lower near the entrance now, he said, frowning at his equipment. Like something's been drawing the air out of the mine. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped toward the opening. We need to see what's down there. Are you crazy? Harold grabbed my arm. That mine's been sealed for good reason. The main shaft probably collapsed decades ago. But as we argued, we heard it again, that tapping sound echoing up from the depths. Only this time, it wasn't random. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap. That's Morse code, Harold whispered. I counted the pattern in my head. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. S-O-S, I said. The tapping stopped for a moment, then started again with a different pattern. Harold pulled out a small notebook and started writing down the dots and dashes as we heard them. When the tapping finally stopped, Harold looked at his notes with a face gone white as paper. What's it say? I asked. His hand was shaking as he held up the notebook. It says, "Help us." A cold wind blew out of the mine entrance, carrying with it that awful smell and something else, the sound of movement deep underground. Not the settling of old timbers or shifting rock, but deliberate movement. Footsteps. "We're calling the state police," Harold said, backing away from the entrance. But before we could move, the tapping started again. This time the message was longer, more complex. Harold scribbled frantically as the sounds echoed up from below. When it finished, he stared at his notes for a long moment before looking up at me. "Bill," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's giving us names." "What names?" "Miners' names from the 1934 disaster." He showed me the list he'd decoded. John Hensley, David Burke, Robert Coleman, James. His voice trailed off, and his face went even paler. "What is it, Harold?" "The last name," he said. "Samuel Dutton." "Dutton? Like your family name?" Harold nodded slowly. "Samuel Dutton was my father. He died in that mine collapse when I was just 8 years old." The wind from the mine entrance picked up, and with it came a new sound. Not tapping this time, but voices, faint and echoing, like people calling from a great distance. "Help us," the voices said. "Help us. Help us." I grabbed Harold's arm and pulled him back toward the trucks. "We're leaving, now." But as we retreated, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mine entrance. Something pale and thin, barely visible in the shadows. For just a moment, I thought I saw a face looking back at us. A human face, but wrong, somehow. Too thin, too gaunt, with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. Then it was gone, leaving us standing in the morning sun, trying to convince ourselves we hadn't seen what we'd just seen. Harold was quiet during the drive back down the mountain. When we reached the ranger station, he sat in his car for a long time before getting out. "Bill," he said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Shoot." "Do you believe in ghosts?" I thought about it for a moment. I believe there are things in these mountains that we don't understand. Things that go back further than any of us can remember. "My grandmother used to tell stories," Harold said, "about miners who got trapped underground and were never found. She said sometimes the mountain wouldn't let them die, wouldn't let them rest. Said they'd keep digging and scratching, trying to find their way back to the surface." "That's just old mountain folklore, Harold." "Is it?" He looked back up toward Black Rock Mountain. "Then what the hell did we just hear down there?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those voices, about the names Harold had decoded, about that glimpse of something pale and wrong moving in the mine entrance. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Harold. "Bill," he said, "I've been doing some research on my father's death, going through old mine records. Find anything interesting?" According to the official report, my father's body was never recovered from the collapse. None of them were. The company said the main shaft was too unstable to attempt a rescue. That's terrible, Harold, but what's your point? My point is this. What if they weren't killed in the collapse? What if they were just trapped? I felt a chill run down my spine. Harold, that was 28 years ago. Even if they survived the initial collapse, they would have died from the gas, or starvation, or maybe they found a way to survive, Harold interrupted. Maybe they adapted. Adapted to what? To living underground, to breathing poison gas, to eating. He paused. God knows what they've been eating. The line went quiet for a moment. Harold, I said finally, we're going back up there tomorrow. But this time, we're bringing backup. No, he said quickly. No police, no other officials. If there really are survivors down there, if my father is somehow still alive after all these years, I don't want them treated like criminals or freaks. Then what do you want to do? I want to go down into that mine and find out the truth. The next morning, Harold showed up at the ranger station with enough equipment to explore a small cave system. Rope, harnesses, portable lights, extra batteries, and a gas mask for each of us. You really think this is a good idea? I asked, looking at all the gear. My father has been down there for 28 years, Bill. If there's even a chance he's still alive, I have to try. I understood. Family is everything in these mountains, and the idea of leaving your people behind goes against everything we believe in. We drove back up to Black Rock just after sunrise. The mine entrance yawned open like a mouth, and that sulfur smell was stronger than ever. But Harold was right about one thing. The gas readings were lower than they should be. It's like something's been filtering the air, Harold said, checking his equipment. The methane levels are high, but not lethal, and the carbon monoxide is almost normal. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. He strapped on his gas mask and checked his headlamp, but I'm going down there anyway. I put on my own mask and followed him into the mine. The main tunnel sloped downward at a steep angle, and our lights revealed that it had been expanded far beyond what the original blueprints showed. The walls were smooth, almost polished, like something had been rubbing against them for years. Look at this, Harold said, stopping to examine the wall. These tool marks are fresh. Someone's been digging here recently. The marks weren't made by normal mining equipment. They looked like they'd been carved by hand tools, or maybe by something sharper, something more primitive. We followed the tunnel deeper into the mountain. Every 100 yards or so, we'd find evidence that someone had been living down here. Bones scattered in the corners, animal bones, mostly deer and rabbit, crude sleeping areas made from old mining timbers, and everywhere, that strange polished look to the walls. How deep does this go? I asked. The original mine only went down about 300 feet, Harold said. But look at this tunnel. It goes much deeper. We'd been walking for about 20 minutes when we heard the first voice. Who's there? It came from somewhere ahead of us, echoing off the tunnel walls. A man's voice, but rough and strange, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. Harold and I stopped, our lights pointing down the tunnel. Hello? Harold called out. We're here to help. Movement in the shadows ahead. Multiple figures, staying just beyond the reach of our lights. You shouldn't be here, the voice said. Not safe for surface folk. We're looking for the miners from 1934, Harold said. Samuel Dutton was my father. Silence for a long moment, then a different voice, older and weaker. Sammy, is that you, boy? Harold's light was shaking now. Dad, is that really you? A figure stepped into the edge of our light. At first glance, it looked human. But as my eyes adjusted, I could see the changes. The man was tall and impossibly thin, like he'd been stretched. His skin was pale as cave fish, almost translucent. His fingers were longer than they should be, ending in thick, yellowed nails that looked more like claws. But the eyes were the worst part. They reflected our lights like an animal's, glowing yellow in the darkness. Harold, the thing said, and I could hear the recognition in its voice. My boy, you grew up. Harold took a step forward, but I grabbed his arm. That's not your father, I whispered. Yes, it is, Harold said. I know his voice. More figures moved in the shadows around us. I could see them better now, and they were all wrong in the same way. Too thin, too pale, with those glowing eyes and claw-like hands. We've been waiting, the thing that claimed to be Harold's father said. Waiting for someone to come, waiting for a way out. How many of you are there? Harold asked. 43 now, came the answer. Lost 4 to the deep tunnels over the years. But the rest of us, we learned to survive. Survive on what? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. The thing that had been Samuel Dutton smiled, showing teeth that had been filed to points. Whatever the mountain provides, it said. Rats and snakes at first, then the deer that fall into the old shafts. Sometimes bears, sometimes. It trailed off, but I could see the hunger in those yellow eyes. Sometimes what? I demanded. Sometimes people who come looking where they shouldn't. It finished. The figures in the shadows moved closer, forming a circle around us. I counted at least a dozen, maybe more. Dad, Harold said, we can help you. We can get you medical attention, find a way to bring you back to the surface. The thing laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Back to the surface? Boy, we tried that the first few years. But the sun burns us now. The clean air chokes us. This is our world now. This is where we belong. Then what do you want? I asked. We want what we've always wanted, it said. To go home, to see our families, to stop being hungry all the time. One of the other creatures spoke up. The boy looks like his father. Good, strong bones. Harold still hadn't understood what was happening, but I was starting to get the picture. These things, whatever they'd become, were predators now, and we'd walked right into their territory. Harold, I said quietly, we need to leave. Now. But it was too late. The circle had closed around us, and I could see more glowing eyes in the tunnels behind us. We were surrounded. The thing that had been Samuel Dutton took another step forward. You can't leave now, son, it said. You just got here, and it's been so long since we had visitors. The last thing I saw before the lights went out was a dozen pairs of yellow eyes rushing toward us through the darkness. I woke up in complete darkness, my head pounding, and my hands tied behind my back. The sulfur smell was overwhelming, and I could hear water dripping somewhere nearby. Harold, I called out. I'm here. His voice came from somewhere to my left. Bill, I think we're in some kind of chamber. My eyes were starting to adjust to the darkness, and I could make out the rough walls of a natural cave. We were much deeper in the mountain now, far from the original mine tunnels. How long were we out? I don't know. Could be hours. Light flickered in the tunnel entrance, and several of the creatures entered carrying torches made from old mining timbers. In the better light, I could see just how far they'd fallen from human. Their skin wasn't just pale, it was almost see-through, showing the dark veins underneath. Their hair had fallen out in patches, and their bodies were covered in old scars and strange growths. But the worst part was how they moved, quick and jerky like insects. The one that claimed to be Harold's father approached us. Sorry about the rough handling, boys, it said. But you were starting to panic, and that's never good down here. What do you want with us? I demanded. Want? We don't want anything from May. We want something for you. It gestured to the other creatures, who began arranging themselves in a circle around us. You see, we've learned a lot about surviving down here over the years. The mountain teaches you things, if you're willing to listen. How to breathe the bad air, how to see in the dark, how to find food when there isn't any, and how to stop being human, I said. The thing smiled with those filed teeth. Being human is what got us trapped down here in the first place. Human bosses who cared more about profit than safety. Human weakness that couldn't survive in the deep places, but were not weak anymore. Harold was struggling against his bonds. Dad, this isn't you. This isn't what you would have wanted. Isn't it? The creature knelt down next to Harold. I spent my whole life breaking my back for men who saw me as nothing but a tool. Dying slowly from black lung and cave-ins and gas explosions. Down here, I'm free. Down here, I'm strong. You're not free, Harold said. You're trapped. You've been trapped for almost 30 years. No, the creature said. We were trapped before. Up there, in that world of bosses and debts, and dying for other men's money. Down here, we make our own rules. The other creatures began to chant, a low humming sound that seemed to come from deep in their chests. The sound echoed off the cave walls, growing louder and more complex. What are they doing? Harold asked. They're welcoming you, the thing said. welcoming you to the family. That's when I understood. They weren't planning to kill us, at least not right away. They were planning to change us, to make us like them. The mountain will teach you, just like it taught us, the creature continued. First, you'll learn to breathe the deep air. Then you'll learn to see without light. Then you'll learn to eat what the mountain provides. And eventually, you'll learn to let go of everything that held you back on the mountain. Surface. Harold, I said, how good are you with knots? Pretty good, he said. Why? Because we're getting out of here. I'd been working on my bonds while the creature was talking, and the rope was starting to loosen. Coal miners know their knots, but forest rangers know them better. The chanting was getting louder, and I could see more creatures gathering in the tunnel entrance. Whatever ritual they were planning, it was about to begin. My hands came free just as the lead creature turned back toward us. Time to begin, it said. I lunged forward, grabbing one of the torches and swinging it at the nearest creature. The flames caught its hair, and it shrieked and stumbled backward. Harold, move! Harold rolled away as I used the torch to burn through his ropes. The creatures were shouting now, but they seemed confused, like they weren't used to prey fighting back. The tunnel, Harold yelled, pointing toward a smaller passage that led away from the main chamber. We ran, our torch throwing wild shadows on the walls. Behind us, I could hear the creatures following, their claws scratching against stone as they moved with inhuman speed. The tunnel twisted and branched, and I quickly lost track of which direction we were going. All I knew was that we had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of those things. Do you know where we're going? Harold panted. No, but anywhere is better than back there. We rounded a corner and found ourselves in another chamber, this one filled with bones. Not just animal bones, human bones. Decades worth of remains, picked clean and stacked in neat piles. Jesus, Harold whispered. They've been down here a long time, I said. And they've been feeding on more than just deer. The sound of pursuing footsteps was getting closer. We had to keep moving. The chamber had 3 tunnel entrances. I chose the one that seemed to slope upward, hoping it might lead us back toward the science and surface. We climbed through narrow passages and squeezed through gaps in the rock. The air was getting slightly fresher, and I thought I could feel a faint breeze. Then we heard it. The sound of machinery. Distant, but definitely mechanical. Someone else is down here, Harold said. We followed the sound through another series of tunnels until we emerged into a large cavern lit by electric lights. Men in hard hats and company coveralls were setting up equipment, and I recognized the logo on their jackets. BlackRock Mining Company. The same company that had abandoned this mine 28 years ago. What the hell are you doing here? One of the men shouted when he saw us. We could ask you the same thing, I replied. The man who seemed to be in charge walked over to us. He was big and well-fed, with the soft look of someone who'd never done a day of real mining in his life. I'm David Carpenter, site supervisor, he said. This is company property, and you're trespassing. This mine was sealed by the state, Harold said. What's your authority to be here? Carpenter smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Our authority is that we own the mineral rights to this mountain. Always have. And recent geological surveys have shown there's still plenty of coal down here. You can't mine here, I said. There are people down in these tunnels. People? Carpenter laughed. Son, this mine's been abandoned for decades. Nothing down here but rats and cave-ins. That's when the screaming started. The creatures had found us. They poured into the cavern from multiple tunnels, moving faster than anything human should be able to move. The mining company workers scattered, some running for their equipment, others just running. But the creatures weren't interested in the workers. They were focused on Carpenter. You, the thing that had been Samuel Dutton said, pointing one clawed finger at the supervisor. Your company. Carpenter backed against a wall, his face white with terror. I don't know what you are, he stammered, but I have nothing to do with what happened here. Company men, the creature said. Always the same. Take everything, give nothing back, leave us to die in the dark. That was decades ago, Carpenter protested. I wasn't even born then. Company is company, the creature replied. What happened next wasn't pretty. The creatures swarmed over Carpenter and his men, and their screams echoed through the cavern for what seemed like hours. Harold and I used the chaos to escape, finding a tunnel that led upward toward what I hoped was the surface. We climbed through the darkness, guided only by the faint movement of air and the distant sound of explosions from below. The mining company had brought dynamite, and something had set it off. The mountain shook around us, and I could hear the groaning of timbers and the crash of falling rock. The explosion had triggered a massive cave-in. "The whole mine system is collapsing," Harold said. "Good," I replied. "Maybe it'll trap those things down there where they belong." We kept climbing until we finally saw daylight filtering through a crack in the rock. It took us another hour to widen the opening enough to squeeze through, but eventually we emerged onto the mountainside, gasping in the clean air and blinking in the sunlight. Below us, Black Rock Mountain rumbled and settled as the underground chambers collapsed one by one. Harold and I stumbled down the mountain, our clothes torn and our faces black with coal dust. By the time we reached the ranger station, the sun was setting. "What do we tell people?" Harold asked. I thought about it for a long moment. We tell them the truth. The mining company was conducting illegal operations in a sealed mine. There was an accident. The mine collapsed. And the creatures? What creatures? All we saw were some wild animals that had made their home in the abandoned tunnels. Mountain cats, maybe. Hard to tell in the dark. Harold nodded slowly. "And my father?" "Your father died in 1934, Harold, along with 46 other men. They deserve to be remembered properly." The official investigation concluded that Black Rock Mining Company had illegally entered the sealed mine in an attempt to extract remaining coal reserves. The resulting explosion and cave-in killed 5 company employees and completely sealed the mine system. The families of the original 1,934 victims finally got their memorial. A granite monument now stands at the base of Black Rock Mountain, listing all 47 names of the men who died there. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, I still drive up that mountain road. I park near where the mine entrance used to be, and I listen. Mostly, there's nothing but silence. But sometimes, just sometimes, I hear faint tapping sounds coming from deep underground. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS, I never respond to those signals. Some doors are better left closed, some hunger's better left unfed. The mountain has its secrets, and some of them need to stay buried. Harold moved away from Pike County 6 months after the incident. He took a job with the State Mining Authority in Frankfort, working to improve safety regulations across Kentucky. He never talks about what we saw in Black Rock Mine, but I know he carries it with him every day. As for me, I'm still here. Still a forest ranger, still protecting these mountains and the people who live in them. But I've learned something important about my job. Sometimes protecting people means keeping them away from certain places. The Black Rock site is permanently off limits now. Too dangerous, too unstable. I make sure the barriers stay up and the warning signs stay posted. Because I know what's still down there in the deep tunnels, and I know that some hungers never die. They just wait. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about what Harold's father said about being free, about making their own rules in the darkness. And I wonder if maybe, in their own terrible way, they found something down there that the rest of us are still looking for. But then I remember the screams of those mining company men, and I know the truth. Some kinds of freedom come at too high a price. The mountain keeps its secrets, and I keep mine. And every night, I pray that's enough to keep the darkness where it belongs. Underground, where it can't hurt anyone else. Where it can't change anyone else into something they were never meant to be. But still, sometimes I hear that tapping, and sometimes, late at night, I find myself tapping back. My name is Jennifer Blackwood, but everyone calls me Jen. I'm 29 years old, and I'm the first woman to become head ranger at Mount Mitchell State Park in North Carolina. Some people think I don't belong here. They think a woman can't handle the highest mountain east of the Mississippi River. But I've got a degree in atmospheric science, and I know these mountains better than most folks know their own backyard. Mount Mitchell stands 6,684 feet tall. Up here, the air gets thin and the weather changes fast. I've been studying high-altitude weather patterns for years, so when strange reports started coming in about weird shadows on the mountain, I figured it was just people seeing things. You know how it is. Thin air makes people dizzy, and mountain fog can play tricks on your eyes. The reports were all the same. Hikers would see shadows moving when nothing was there to cast them. Shadows that seemed to dance and shift on their own. Some folks even said the shadows looked like people dancing in a circle. I laughed it off at first. I'm a scientist. I believe in facts, not ghost stories. But then Dr. Kevin Nash showed up. He's a meteorologist from the university, and he brought all kinds of fancy equipment to study the mountain's weather. Kevin's about my age, tall and skinny with thick glasses that are always sliding down his nose. He pushes them up at least 20 times a day. We were supposed to work together, tracking the strange weather patterns that seemed to happen whenever people reported seeing the shadows. There's something weird going on up here, Jen, Kevin told me on his first day. He was setting up a barometric pressure monitor near the summit. The pressure readings don't match anything we should be seeing in clear weather. I helped him carry his equipment up the trail. The stuff was heavy. Cameras, air pressure sensors, temperature gauges. Kevin was convinced we could find a scientific explanation for everything. I liked that about him. No nonsense, just facts and numbers. But then his camera equipment started acting up. The digital photos showed dark shapes that weren't there when we took the pictures. Kevin kept adjusting the settings, cleaning the lenses, even brought backup cameras. Same thing every time. Shadows where nothing existed. Must be some kind of interference, Kevin muttered, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. I noticed other strange things too. Animals acted different up here. Birds would suddenly stop singing, and squirrels would freeze like they were scared of something. Even on sunny days, I sometimes felt like I was being watched. The hair on my arms would stand up for no reason, but I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. I had to prove I belonged here. If I started believing in ghost stories, the other rangers would never take me seriously. So, I pushed down the uneasy feeling in my stomach and focused on the science. The Cherokee people have stories about this mountain. They call it the place where spirits dance. I'd heard the stories from Robert Hawk, a tribal elder who sometimes visited the park. But stories are just stories, right? I mean, every mountain has legends. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from just out of sight. Kevin had been on the mountain for 3 days when it happened. We were taking atmospheric readings near the summit, just above 6,000 feet. The air was crystal clear. No fog, no clouds, perfect visibility for miles. That's when I saw my own shadow do something impossible. I was standing next to Kevin's equipment, writing notes on a clipboard. The sun was behind me, casting my shadow on the rocky ground in front of me. A normal shadow, just like it should be. But then I moved to the left, and my shadow didn't. It stayed put for maybe 2 seconds while I moved away from it. Then it seemed to realize its mistake and snapped back to where it should be, like a rubber band pulling tight. My pen stopped working. I stared at the ground where my shadow was supposed to be. Everything looked normal now, but I knew what I'd seen. "Kevin," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "Did you see that?" He was bent over his pressure gauge, pushing his glasses up his nose. "See what?" "My shadow. It didn't move with me." Kevin looked up and squinted at me through his thick glasses. "Come on, Jen. Shadows don't move on their own. Maybe you just got a little dizzy. The altitude affects everyone differently." But even as he said it, Kevin's own shadow was acting strange. It seemed darker than it should be, more solid somehow. And when Kevin moved, his shadow followed just a split second too late. "Kevin," I whispered, "look at your shadow." He looked down and went completely still. His shadow was there, but it was facing the wrong direction. Kevin was looking at me, but his shadow was turned toward the tree line, like it was watching something in the woods. "That's not possible," Kevin said. His voice was shaky now. He moved his arm, and his shadow moved its arm too. But everything was wrong. The timing was off, like watching a badly dubbed movie. Then things got worse. More shadows started appearing around us. Dark shapes that looked like people, but no one was there to cast them. They moved across the rocky ground in a slow circle, like they were dancing. One by one, they filled the clearing until we were surrounded by shadows with no bodies. Kevin grabbed his camera and started taking pictures, but his hands were shaking so bad the camera kept slipping. "This is incredible," he whispered. "We're documenting something completely new to science." But I wasn't thinking about science anymore. I was thinking about getting out of there. The shadow figures moved closer. They didn't make any sound, but I could feel them somehow, like a cold pressure in the air. My own shadow was pulling away from me now, trying to join the dance. I had to concentrate to keep it attached to my feet. "Kevin, we need to leave. Now." "But the readings," Kevin said. He was still taking pictures, even though his hands were shaking. "Look at the barometric pressure. It's dropping fast, but there's no weather system anywhere near here." One of the shadow dancers moved right up to Kevin's equipment. I watched as it reached out with a shadow hand and touched the pressure gauge. The needle spun wildly, then the whole device just shut off. "Kevin!" But Kevin was mesmerized. He was staring at the shadows like they were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. His own shadow had almost completely separated from his body now. It was standing a few feet away, mimicking the dance of the other figures. I grabbed Kevin's arm and pulled him toward the trail. "We're leaving, right now." For a moment, Kevin resisted. His shadow was pulling him toward the circle of dancers. But then, he seemed to snap out of it and let me drag him away. We practically ran down the trail, leaving all his expensive equipment behind. When we finally stopped to catch our breath about a quarter-mile down the mountain, Kevin's shadow was back to normal. So was mine. "What just happened up there?" Kevin asked. He cleaned his glasses with shaking hands. I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure. We weren't dealing with weather patterns or optical illusions anymore. After that first encounter, Kevin became obsessed. He spent the next week reading everything he could find about Mount Mitchell. Cherokee legends, geological surveys, atmospheric studies. He brought more equipment up the mountain every day, trying to measure and document everything. "There has to be a scientific explanation," he kept saying. "Shadows can't exist without objects to cast them. It's physically impossible." But the impossible kept happening. The shadow dancers appeared every day, now, always in the same spot near the summit. They only showed up above 6,000 feet, and only when Kevin and I were together. Other hikers would walk right through the area and see nothing unusual. That should have been my first clue that something was specifically targeting us. Robert Hawk, the Cherokee elder, came to visit me at the ranger station 3 days after our first encounter. He's a small, quiet man in his 70s with long gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He knows these mountains like they're part of his family. "The spirits are restless," he told me. "They're trying to tell you something. Mr. Hawk, I appreciate the concern, but we're dealing with some kind of atmospheric phenomenon here." "Doctor?" "Nash thinks it might be related to electromagnetic fields or temperature inversions." Robert just smiled sadly. "Jennifer, your scientist friend is playing with forces he doesn't understand. The shadow dancers have protected this mountain for hundreds of years. They don't like being studied like bugs under a microscope." But I wasn't ready to accept that explanation. I had a job to do, and Kevin was making real scientific progress. His equipment was recording temperature changes, pressure drops, even electromagnetic spikes that happened whenever the shadows appeared. Then the shadows started following us home. It began small. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision when I was alone in the ranger station. Dark shapes that vanished when I turned to look directly at them. My coffee cup would slide across my desk when no one was around. Papers would flutter in rooms with no wind. Kevin had it worse. His shadow started acting up even when we weren't on the mountain. At his motel room, his shadow would sometimes point in different directions than his body. When he'd reach for his coffee, his shadow would reach for his notebook. When he'd walk to the bathroom, his shadow would walk toward the window. "It's getting stronger," Kevin told me. We were sitting in my office, going over his latest readings. "Whatever's happening up there, it's affecting us even when we're not on the mountain." I looked at Kevin's shadow on the wall behind him. As he talked, his shadow was nodding along, but Kevin wasn't moving his head at all. "Kevin," I said quietly, "don't move. Just look at the wall behind me." He turned his head slowly, and his face went white. My shadow was waving at him. My actual body was sitting perfectly still, but my shadow was moving its hand back and forth in a friendly wave. "This isn't possible," Kevin whispered. But it was happening anyway. That night, I called Robert Hawk and asked him to meet me at the ranger station in the morning. It was time to stop pretending this was just science. When Robert arrived, he took one look at me and frowned. "Your shadow is very dark today, Jennifer. Darker than it should be." I looked down. He was right. My shadow seemed thicker, more solid than usual, like it was made of something heavier than just blocked light. Mr. Hawk, I need you to tell me about the shadow dancers, the real story, not the tourist version. Robert sat down across from my desk and folded his hands in his lap. Mount Mitchell has always been a sacred place, a thin place where the spirit world touches our world. The shadow dancers are spirits of our ancestors. They guard the mountain from those who would harm it. Harm it how? The mountain is sick, Jennifer. Acid rain, pollution, too many visitors who don't respect the sacred places. The barrier between worlds is getting weak. The spirits are scared that they'll lose their connection to this place forever. But why are they following us? We're not trying to hurt the mountain. Robert looked at Kevin's shadow on the wall. It was moving independently again, practicing some kind of dance steps while Kevin sat perfectly still. Your friend is trying to prove that spirits don't exist. He wants to explain away the sacred with his machines and numbers. The spirits don't like that. They're trying to show him that some things can't be measured. Kevin had been listening to all this with a skeptical expression, but when Robert pointed out his dancing shadow, Kevin's face went pale. There has to be a scientific explanation, Kevin said, but his voice didn't sound confident anymore. Perhaps, Robert said, but science and spirit don't have to be enemies. The real question is, what are you going to do when you find out the shadows want something from you? As if in response to his words, every shadow in the room, mine, Kevin's, Robert's, even the shadows cast by the furniture, all turned to face the window. They were all looking toward Mount Mitchell, and I realized that the shadows weren't just watching us anymore. They were waiting for something. The answer came during the worst storm in 20 years. Kevin and I had been monitoring a massive weather system approaching from the west. The Meteorological Service was predicting severe thunderstorms, possible tornadoes, and winds up to 80 miles per hour. But what Kevin's equipment was showing didn't match any normal weather pattern. The pressure readings are impossible, Kevin said, staring at his computer screen. It's like the atmosphere is being twisted by some external force. We were in the ranger station, watching the storm approach through the windows. Dark clouds rolled over the mountains like a black blanket. But they moved in ways that didn't make sense. They swirled around Mount Mitchell's peak, forming patterns that looked almost like dancing. Kevin, I said slowly, look at the cloud formations. He looked up from his screen and stared out the window. The clouds were moving in a circle around the mountain, just like the shadow dancers. But these clouds were massive, stretching for miles. That's not meteorologically possible, Kevin whispered. Then Robert Hawk burst through the door without knocking. His face was grim, and he was breathing hard like he'd been running. Now, you have to get to the mountain, he said. Now. The spirits are calling the storm to protect themselves, but they can't control something this big. They need help. Help with what? I asked. The barrier is breaking. The storm is tearing holes between the worlds. If it breaks completely, both worlds will be destroyed. Kevin stood up so fast his chair fell over. That's insane. Spirits can't control weather. There's a perfectly logical explanation for what we're seeing. But even as he said it, Kevin's shadow was already moving toward the door. It was pulling him toward Mount Mitchell. Your shadow knows the truth even if you don't, Robert said to Kevin. The spirits chose you both because you have the knowledge they need. Jennifer understands the mountain, and you understand the atmosphere. Together, you can help them save both worlds. The storm hit just as we reached the base of Mount Mitchell. Rain came down in sheets, and lightning turned the sky white every few seconds. The wind was so strong I could barely stand up. But we climbed anyway. My shadow and Kevin's shadow were pulling us up the mountain, leading us through the storm like they could see a path we couldn't. As we climbed higher, the storm got stranger. The rain wasn't falling down anymore. It was swirling around us in spirals. Lightning was striking the same spots over and over, but nothing was catching fire. And through it all, I could see shapes in the storm. Dark figures dancing in the clouds. The shadow dancers, I breathed. They're in the storm. When we reached the summit, we found dozens of shadow figures waiting for us. But these weren't like the shadows we'd seen before. These shadows had substance, weight. They moved like real people, and when they touched us, we could feel it. One of them approached me. It looked like a woman, tall and graceful, with long hair that moved in a wind I couldn't feel. When she spoke, Her voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "The barrier is breaking," she said. "Our world is bleeding into yours. The storm will tear both apart unless you help us repair it." "How?" I asked. "Your friend must choose. He can use his knowledge to strengthen the barrier from this side, but he will have to cross over to our world to do it. He will become one of us." I looked at Kevin. He was staring at the shadow woman with wide eyes, his equipment forgotten at his feet. "Kevin," I said, "you don't have to do this." But Kevin's shadow was already stepping forward, separating completely from his body. It walked over to stand with the shadow dancers. "I've been studying the wrong thing," Kevin said quietly. "I was trying to prove the spirits don't exist, but I should have been trying to understand how they do exist. This is the discovery of a lifetime. Kevin, if you do this, you can't come back." He smiled sadly and pushed his glasses up his nose one last time. "Some discoveries are worth everything, Jen. Besides, my shadows already made the choice. The storm was getting worse. Lightning was striking all around us, and the wind was so loud I could barely hear Kevin talking. But I could see the shadow dancers forming a circle around us, their arms raised toward the sky. Kevin walked into the center of the circle. As soon as he stepped inside, his body became transparent. I could see through him like he was made of mist. "Tell them I chose this," Kevin called to me. "Tell them I found something amazing." Then Kevin's body dissolved completely, and his shadow became solid. He was one of the shadow dancers now, but I could still see his face, still see his thick glasses. The shadow dancers began their dance, and Kevin danced with them. As they moved, the storm started to change. The chaotic winds became organized. The random lightning began striking in patterns. The barrier between worlds was healing, but it wasn't enough. The storm was too big, too powerful. The shadow dancers needed more help. That's when I understood what I had to do. I stepped into the circle. I didn't become a shadow like Kevin did. Instead, something else happened. As soon as I joined the dance, I could see both worlds at once. The physical world of mountains and storms, and the spirit world of the dancers. I became a bridge between them. With my help, the shadow dancers were able to calm the storm. Not stop it completely, that would have caused other problems, but guide it safely around the mountain and out to sea. The barrier between worlds sealed itself, stronger than before. When it was over, I found myself standing alone on the summit. The storm was gone, and the sun was shining. Kevin was nowhere to be seen, but I could feel him nearby. Sometimes, when the light is just right, I can see his shadow among the dancers. I walked back down the mountain to find Robert Hawk waiting at the tree line. He smiled when he saw me. "You did well," he said. "The spirits accept you as a guardian now." And that's what I became. I'm still the head ranger at Mount Mitchell, but now I have additional responsibilities. I work with the Cherokee Tribal Council to protect the sacred sites on the mountain. I monitor the barrier between worlds, watching for signs of weakness or danger. The shadow dancers still appear sometimes, usually when the mountain is threatened. But now I can communicate with them properly. Kevin sends me data from the spirit world. Weather patterns I never could have imagined. Atmospheric readings from a dimension where physics works differently. Some nights, when I'm doing paperwork in the ranger station, Kevin's shadow appears on my wall. He waves at me, and I wave back. He seems happy in his new existence, still studying and learning, just from a different perspective. The official report said that Dr. Kevin Nash was lost in the storm while conducting atmospheric research. His equipment was found damaged but still functional. The data it collected has helped meteorologists better understand high-altitude weather patterns, though they can't explain some of the readings. I never told anyone the real story. Who would believe it? Instead, I focus on my job, protecting the mountain and the people who visit it. I restrict access to certain areas during times when the barrier is thin. I teach visitors to respect the sacred places and the old stories. And sometimes, when hikers ask me about the Cherokee legends of spirits dancing on the mountain, I smile and tell them that some stories are truer than others. I watch their shadows as I speak, looking for signs that the dancers have chosen new allies. Because the mountain still needs protection. The barrier between worlds is stronger now, but it's not permanent. Pollution still threatens the ecosystem. Climate change affects the delicate balance that keeps both worlds stable. And there are always people who want to exploit rather than protect. But the shadow dancers are patient. They've been guarding this mountain for centuries, and they'll guard it for centuries more. And now they have help from both worlds, spirits with ancient wisdom and humans with modern knowledge. Kevin was right about one thing. Some discoveries are worth everything. My name is Jennifer Blackwood, and I'm the guardian of Mount Mitchell. I protect the highest peak east of the Mississippi River, and I protect the worlds that touch it. Most days, it's just a job. But some days, when the light is right and the air is thin, I dance with shadows on a mountaintop and help keep two worlds from falling apart. That's not something they teach you in atmospheric science classes, but it's the most important work I've ever done. My name is Charles Whitman, but everyone calls me Charlie. I'm a forest ranger, been working these woods for 14 years now. Before that, I fought in the Pacific during the war. Saw things there that still wake me up some nights. That's part of why I love this job. The quiet, the peace, just me and the trees most days. The George Washington National Forest is my beat, specifically the Blood Creek area near the Maryland border. It's remote country, the kind of place where you can walk for hours and never see another soul. Most folks avoid it in winter. Smart folks anyway. February 1956 was brutal. I'm talking 20 below zero, wind that cut through your coat like it wasn't there. The kind of cold that kills. We had 3 hunting parties that went out into the deep woods and never came back. Their families were scared sick, calling the ranger station every few hours. My supervisor called me in on a Tuesday morning. "Charlie, we need you to lead a search team. These boys have been missing 4 days now." I knew those woods better than anyone. If someone was alive out there, I'd find them. But I also knew what 4 days in that cold meant. Still, I grabbed my gear, snowshoes, emergency food, medical kit, my rifle, always carried that old Springfield from the war. Old habits. David Cross was assigned as my partner. Good kid, maybe 25, been a ranger for 2 years. Eager to prove himself. We also had Pete Saunders, a local guide whose family had lived in these mountains for generations. Pete knew stories about these woods that went back to his great-grandfather's time. "Weather's supposed to get worse," David said as we loaded the truck. "Maybe we should wait." "Can't wait," I told him. "Every hour we lose is an hour those boys don't have." Pete climbed into the passenger seat, his weathered face grim. "My family's been hunting these woods for 100 years," he said. "Never seen a winter this mean. Animals are acting strange, too. Bears should be sleeping, but we've seen tracks. Fresh ones." I started the engine. The heater barely worked, and our breath made clouds in the cab. "What kind of strange?" "Running, all heading south, like something scared them off." Pete pulled his wool hat down over his ears. "Old-timers used to tell stories about winters like this. Said when the cold got bad enough, it brought things out. Hungry things." David laughed nervously. "Come on, Pete. You don't believe those old stories." Pete just looked out the window at the gray sky. "Don't matter what I believe. Cold, don't care if you believe in it or not." We drove as far as we could on the logging roads, then strapped on snowshoes and headed into the wilderness. The snow was 3 feet deep in places, and every step was work. The wind never stopped howling through the bare trees. Our first destination was Hawk Ridge, where the first hunting party was supposed to set up camp. It took us 2 hours of hard walking to get there. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching us, probably just nerves. When we found their camp, my blood went cold. 3 tents, still standing but abandoned. Gear scattered everywhere, like they'd left in a hurry. Their truck was there, but it wouldn't start. Dead battery from the cold. "Look at this," David called out. He was standing by their food supply. Every can of meat was gone. The vegetables were still there, but everything with protein had been taken, even the canned Spam. I knelt down to examine the snow around the camp. Boot prints everywhere. But they told a story I didn't like. The tracks started normal, organized, purposeful, but as I followed them away from camp, they became erratic, stumbling, desperate. They were hungry, I said, real hungry. Pete was studying something near the fire pit. "Charlie, come look at this." In the cold ashes, I could see bone fragments. Small ones. "Rabbit maybe," I said, but Pete shook his head. Wrong shape. And look here. He pointed to marks in a nearby tree. Deep scratches, too high up for any animal I knew. Something was here, something big. The temperature was dropping fast. We had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and we needed to find shelter. The missing hunters' camp would have to do. As we set up for the night, I noticed Pete wasn't eating much of our food. Said he wasn't hungry, but I could see his hands shaking. Not from cold, from something else. That first night, I heard things moving outside our tent. Footsteps in the snow, circling the camp. When I unzipped the tent flap to look, there was nothing there. Just the wind and the endless white. But in the morning, there were tracks. Human tracks, but wrong somehow. Too long, with what looked like claw marks at the toes. David saw them too. What the hell made those? I didn't have an answer. 14 years in these woods, and I'd never seen anything like it. We broke camp at first light and followed the strange tracks deeper into the forest. They led us down into the Blood Creek Valley, where the snow was even deeper, and the trees grew so thick they blocked out most of the sky. This is where the second hunting party was headed, Pete said, checking his map. Thompson's group. 5 men. The tracks we were following joined up with more human footprints, but these were even more disturbing. Some showed bare feet in the snow. Others dragged, like someone was being pulled. 2 hours in, we found the second camp. It was a nightmare. 2 tents were shredded, the fabric hanging in strips like something with claws had torn through them. Sleeping bags were scattered and bloody. Gear was thrown everywhere, and the snow around the camp was stained dark red. David threw up in the bushes. I'd seen worse in the war, but this was different. This was supposed to be peaceful country. We found the first body near the creek. What was left of it? Joe Thompson, according to the wallet in his coat. Parts of him were missing, taken with surgical precision. Animals, David said, wiping his mouth. Had to be animals. But I knew better. I'd seen what bears and wolves did to prey. This was something else. The cuts were too clean, too purposeful. And there were other marks on the bones. Teeth marks, but not from any animal in these woods. Where are the other 4? I asked. We spread out to search. Pete found more blood trails leading away from camp. Multiple trails, heading in different directions. Like the group had scattered in panic. Following the clearest trail, we found the second body a quarter mile away. Then the third. Each one was partially consumed. But in the same way. Muscle tissue taken first, then organs. Like whatever did this knew exactly what it wanted. The fourth body was different. Tom Bradley, the guide for Thompson's group. He was intact, just frozen solid. But clutched in his hands was a notebook, and the final entry was written in shaky handwriting. Asterisk, day 3. Food gone. Jerry went crazy last night. Ate raw meat from the supply pack, said he could hear something calling to him. Then Jerry disappeared. Found his clothes by the creek, but no body. Something big is out there. Something that talks like Jerry, but isn't Jerry. We can hear it in the woods, using Jerry's voice to call us. Tom says we should run, but where? It knows these woods better than we do. God help us. Asterisk. The 5th man, Jerry Wilson, was nowhere to be found. We need to get out of here, David said. His face was pale, and he kept looking over his shoulder. But Pete was acting strange. He'd been quiet all morning, and now he was studying the bodies with too much interest. When he thought we weren't looking, I saw him pocket something from one of the victims' packs. Pete, what did you take? I asked. He turned around, and for just a second, I saw something different in his eyes. Something hungry. Nothing, Charlie, just checking their gear for anything useful. That afternoon, we found signs of the 3rd hunting party. The Kowalski brothers and their cousin Mike. Their trail was fresher, maybe 2 days old. We followed it up a steep ridge, the snow getting deeper with every step. The wind was picking up again, and the temperature was dropping fast. We needed to find them soon, or we'd have to make camp in this exposed area. Near the top of the ridge, we found drag marks in the snow. Long furrows like someone had been pulled along against their will. The marks led to a cluster of rocks where we found more blood, but no bodies. That's when we heard it. A voice calling from deeper in the woods. Help, someone help me. It sounded like a man, weak and scared. We followed the voice through the trees until we found him, Mike Kowalski. Huddled under a fallen log, barely alive. His eyes were wild with terror, and he was so thin I could see his ribs through his torn shirt. "The hungry one," he kept saying. "It took them. Took Johnny and Paul." "What took them?" I asked, wrapping him in my spare coat. "Tall thing. Used to be a man, I think. But wrong. All stretched out and thin, with teeth like broken glass. It talked to us in Paul's voice after Paul was gone. Tried to get us to come closer." Mike was babbling, clearly suffering from exposure and shock. But his description sent chills down my spine. "We have to get you to a hospital," David said. But Mike grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "No, can't leave the woods. It won't let us. Every time we try to head out, it appears. Blocks the way. It wants us to stay. Wants us to get hungry enough." "Hungry enough for what?" Pete asked, and there was something in his voice that made me look at him sharply. Mike's eyes fixed on Pete with sudden terror. "You know, don't you? You can smell it on me. The hunger, it changes you, makes you want things you shouldn't want." I was about to ask what he meant when we heard something crashing through the trees behind us. Something big, moving fast. "Run," Mike whispered. We ran. We carried Mike between us, stumbling through the deep snow as something pursued us through the trees. I could hear it breaking branches, keeping pace with us easily. Sometimes I caught glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. I know something tall and pale moving between the tree trunks. We made it to a small clearing before Mike collapsed completely. He was burning up with fever despite the cold, and kept mumbling about being hungry. So very hungry. "We need to build a fire," David said. "He's going into shock." While David gathered wood, I tried to get more information from Mike. "How long were you out here?" 5 days, maybe 6. Lost track. His voice was getting weaker. "First day was normal, good hunting, found a nice spot to camp. Second day, the temperature dropped and we decided to head back. That's when we saw the tracks." "What kind of tracks?" "Human, but wrong. Too big, with claw marks." Paul thought maybe it was just distorted by the wind, but Johnny knew better. Johnny's family is part Cherokee. Said his grandmother told stories about things like this. Pete was standing at the edge of the clearing, looking back the way we'd come. "We should keep moving," he said. "Fire will draw attention." "Mike can't walk," I told him. "We rest here tonight, move out at first light." As David got the fire going, Mike continued his story. Third day, our food started disappearing. Not all of it, just the meat. Paul accused Johnny of hoarding, and they got into a fight. That night, we heard Paul's voice calling from the woods, but Paul was right there in his sleeping bag. The fire crackled to life, casting dancing shadows across Mike's face. Fourth day, Paul was gone. Just gone. His sleeping bag was empty, but there was no sign of struggle. Later that afternoon, we heard him calling for help from deeper in the woods. Johnny wanted to go look, but I stopped him. That wasn't Paul's voice. It was close, but wrong somehow, like someone trying to imitate him. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. In the war, we'd heard stories from Pacific Islanders about spirits that could mimic human voices to lure people to their deaths. "What happened to Johnny?" David asked. Mike started crying. "I let it take him. God forgive me, I let it take him." He looked up at us with tears freezing on his cheeks. Fifth day, we were so hungry. Found some of Paul's remains. Johnny said we had to, or we'd die. I couldn't do it. But Johnny, his voice broke. After Johnny ate, he started changing. Got taller, thinner. His fingernails grew into claws. And he was still hungry. So hungry he looked at me like I was food. Pete had been quiet during this whole story, but now he stepped closer to the fire. "What did you do?" I ran. Heard Johnny calling my name all night, but it wasn't Johnny anymore. Then, this morning, I heard you guys coming and thought maybe I was saved. Mike grabbed my arm again. "But you don't understand. It's still out there. And once you've been in these woods long enough, once you get hungry enough, it gets into your head. Makes you think about things you shouldn't think about." Our own food supplies were running low. We'd planned for a 3-day search, but this was our 4th day. I'd been trying not to think about it, but my stomach was cramping with hunger. Looking at my companions, I could see they were feeling it too. David kept glancing at our remaining food pack. Pete hadn't eaten anything all day, claiming he wasn't hungry, but I could see his hands shaking. That night, I took first watch while the others slept. The fire was warm, But beyond its circle of light, the darkness seemed alive. I kept hearing sounds, branches breaking, snow crunching under heavy footsteps, and sometimes voices. David's voice calling my name from the woods, my dead brother's voice, killed at Iwo Jima, telling me to come find him, even my own voice, echoing back from the trees. Around midnight, I heard Pete get up, thought he was going to relieve himself, but he was gone too long. I found him at the edge of camp, gnawing on something in the darkness. "Pete, what are you eating?" He spun around, and in the moonlight I could see his face was smeared with something dark. "Nothing, Charlie. Just some jerky I had saved." But there was no jerky left in our packs. I knew because I'd checked our supplies before my watch started. "Show me." He backed away, still chewing. "It's fine, I'm fine, go back to the fire." That's when I saw what he was really eating. A chunk of frozen meat that definitely wasn't from any deer. The shape was wrong. Too uniform. Too familiar. "Pete, where did you get that?" His eyes caught the moonlight, and for a moment, they seemed to glow. "Found it, just found it in the snow." He took another bite, and I could hear his teeth crunching through bone. I drew my rifle. "Put it down, now." "Can't do that, Charlie." His voice was changing, getting deeper. "Too hungry. Been hungry for days. Ever since we found that first camp." He stood up, and I realized he was taller than he'd been that morning. Definitely taller. "The Kowalski boy was right," Pete continued, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It gets in your head, shows you things, makes you understand." His fingers were longer now, with black nails that had grown into claws. "Makes you hungry for what you really need." I should have shot him then. Should have put a bullet in his chest before he could change any more. But Pete had been my friend for 5 years. We'd shared campfires and coffee and stories about our families. That hesitation almost got me killed. Pete lunged faster than any human could move, claws extended, toward my throat. I barely got my rifle up in time to block, and his claws scraped across the metal barrel with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. My shot went wild, but the noise woke David and Mike. David came running with his pistol drawn, but Pete was already melting back into the darkness between the trees. "What happened?" David shouted. "Pete's been eating human flesh," I said, working the bolt to chamber another round. "And it's changing him." Mike was sitting up in his sleeping bag, nodding grimly. "Told you, the hunger changes you, makes you into what it wants you to be." We spent the rest of the night huddled around the fire, weapons ready, listening to Pete moving through the woods around us. Sometimes he would call to us in his normal voice, asking why we'd turned on him. Other times, he would use David's voice, or mine, trying to get us to come looking. Just before dawn, we heard him one last time. But it wasn't Pete's voice anymore. It was something else entirely, deeper, older, full of an endless hunger that echoed through the trees like wind through a cemetery. And it knew our names. At first light, we found David's body 50 yards from camp. His throat had been torn out, and most of the muscle tissue from his arms and legs was gone. The snow around him was churned up and bloody, showing signs of a struggle. But what really turned my stomach was the expression on his face, pure terror, but also recognition. He'd known his killer. Mike was catatonic with shock. Just sat there staring at David's remains, muttering, "It's in all of us now. The hunger's in all of us." I checked our supplies. The last of our food was gone, taken during the night while the thing that used to be Pete was killing David. We were maybe 10 miles from the nearest road, with no food and a blizzard moving in. "We have to get out of here," I told Mike. "Can you walk?" He looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Where?" "It won't. Let us leave. Every trail leads back to it." He pointed toward the tree line. "Look." I turned and saw Pete standing at the edge of the clearing. At least, it had been Pete once. The thing watching us was 8 feet tall and skeleton thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its skin was gray-white like old snow, stretched tight over jutting bones. But the worst part was its face, still recognizably Pete's features, but elongated and twisted, with yellow teeth that had grown into fangs. "Hello, Charlie," it said in Pete's voice. "You look hungry." I raised my rifle, but the Wendigo just smiled. "Silver bullets, Charlie. Remember the old stories. Only silver can kill something like me." My blood ran cold. Pete had always carried silver ammunition for emergencies. Said his grandfather taught him that some things required special bullets. I'd thought it was just mountain superstition. You took his ammo, I said, among other things. The Wendigo opened its mouth wider than any human could, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. I took his knowledge, his memories, his taste for human flesh. Want to know what David tasted like? I fired anyway, putting 3 rounds center mass. The bullets hit, punching holes through its chest, but the Wendigo just laughed. The wounds closed up within seconds, flesh flowing back together like water. Waste of ammunition, it said, though I appreciate the gesture. Behind me, Mike made a choking sound. When I glanced back, he was looking at David's body with the same hungry expression I'd seen on Pete's face. Mike? No. So hungry, he whispered. Haven't eaten in days, just a little bit, just enough to keep going. The Wendigo clapped its hands with delight. Yes, you understand now. The hunger makes it all clear. Survival trumps everything. Morality is just a luxury for the well-fed. I grabbed Mike's arm and hauled him to his feet. We're leaving. Now. The Wendigo moved to block our path, faster than anything had a right to move. But you just got here, and you haven't had dinner yet. For the next hour, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the woods. Every time I thought we'd found a way out, the Wendigo would appear ahead of us, herding us deeper into the wilderness. It was toying with us, letting us exhaust ourselves while it waited for hunger and desperation to do its work. Mike was getting worse. Kept talking about how good David had looked, how the smell of blood made his mouth water. I had to physically stop him from going back to the body twice. It's not your fault, I told him. It's this place, this thing. It gets in your head. But I could feel it too. The gnawing hunger, the way my thoughts kept drifting to forbidden possibilities. How long had it been since I'd eaten? Days? The Wendigo's influence was growing stronger. As the sun set, we found temporary shelter in an old hunting cabin, hidden in a stand of pine trees. It was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a working wood stove and a supply of dry firewood. I barricaded the door and windows while Mike huddled by the stove. Outside, we could hear the Wendigo circling the cabin, sometimes scratching at the walls with its claws, sometimes calling to us in the voices of people we'd loved and lost. Charlie, this is your father. Open the door, son. I have something to tell you. Mike, it's your wife Sarah. I'm hurt. Please help me. But worst of all was when it used David's voice. Why didn't you save me, Charlie? I trusted you to protect me. Around midnight, Mike snapped. Started clawing at the barricaded door, screaming that he had to get out, had to find food. I had to knock him unconscious to stop him. That's when I remembered something from my army days. Our chaplain had told us about spiritual warfare, about fighting evil with faith and determination. I wasn't a particularly religious man, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I found Pete's pack in the corner of the cabin. His personal gear was still there, including a small leather pouch I'd seen him carry but never asked about. Inside were 6 silver bullets, hand-cast and blessed by someone who knew what they were for. I loaded one into my rifle and waited. The Wendigo came through the cabin wall like it was made of paper, claws extended and mouth wide. But for just a moment, maybe because of the silver, maybe because some part of Pete was still fighting inside the monster, it hesitated. Do it, Pete's voice whispered from the Wendigo's throat. End this, please. I put the silver bullet through its heart. The Wendigo screamed with a sound like winter wind through dead trees, then collapsed. As it died, it seemed to shrink back down to human size, Pete's familiar features returning to normal. Thank you, he whispered with his last breath. I burned the body immediately, using most of the cabin's firewood to make sure nothing remained. Some things shouldn't be allowed to come back. Mike and I were found 2 days later by a search team, half dead from exposure and starvation. I told them the others had died from the cold and wild animals. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. The official report listed the deaths as exposure-related with predation by bears. The cannibalism evidence was classified and filed away where curious minds couldn't find it. Some truths are too disturbing for public consumption. I spent 3 months in the hospital recovering from frostbite and malnutrition. The physical wounds healed, but the other damage never did. I couldn't handle winter assignments anymore. Couldn't even look at snow without feeling that gnawing hunger creeping back into my thoughts. I transferred to a station in Georgia, where the winters are mild and the forests feel safer. But I still wake up some nights hearing voices calling my name from the darkness. Still catch myself thinking about things I shouldn't think about when I get too hungry. Mike recovered physically, but he was never the same. Last I heard, he'd moved to Florida and refused to go camping ever again. Smart man. I never told Pete's family what really happened to him. How could I? Instead, I said he died a hero, trying to save the others. It wasn't entirely a lie. In the end, Pete did help me stop the monster he'd become. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind sounds just right, I wonder if I really killed it. Or if the Wendigo was just one part of something larger, something that's been in those woods since long before any of us arrived. The old-timers say the Wendigo comes when winter gets bad enough, when the cold and hunger strip away everything civilized and leave only the animal need to survive. They say it feeds on desperation and turns good people into monsters. I believe them now. I still carry silver bullets in my kit, just in case. And I tell other rangers about the dangers of extreme isolation, though I can't tell them the whole truth. Some things people need to learn for themselves. The Blood Creek area is officially closed to hunting now, supposedly due to dangerous wildlife activity. The real reason is filed away in a folder marked Unusual Incidents, where it keeps company with other things the government would rather people not know about. But the Wendigo is still out there, somewhere in those dark woods, waiting for the next winter desperate enough to wake it. Waiting for the next group of people hungry enough to hear its call, and hungry enough to answer.